The bell rang, and students poured out of the classroom, chattering about the unusual disillusionment charm lesson they'd just had. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged looks and hurried through the crowd to catch up with Professor Sargeras as he left. "Professor!" Harry called, breathless. "We have something to report." Sargeras stopped and turned. "Already?" he asked. "It's about Karkaroff," Harry whispered. "Last night we saw him leave the Durmstrang ship late and go to Professor Snape's dungeon." Ron jumped in eagerly. "They must be plotting something." Sargeras's expression didn't change, only his gray eyes narrowed a little. "I'm aware," he said calmly. "I'll keep an eye on it." Harry hesitated, then, finding courage, added, "Professor, we also saw Charlie Weasley, Ron's brother. He's supposed to be in Romania studying dragons. We were wondering, could the first task be dragons?" Sargeras regarded their anxious faces with a steady glance. "I don't know," he said plainly. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. That's the fairest thing to do for every champion." Harry's face flushed, but he nodded. It was the answer he'd expected. After a beat, he found himself falling into step behind Sargeras, heading away from Gryffindor Tower. The professor stopped again and cocked his head. "Any other questions, Mr. Potter?" "And no, Professor," Harry stammered. Sargeras's tone held a small quirk of curiosity. "Then why are you following me?" Harry looked up, offering a nervous, helpless smile. "All the champions have to go to the staff room to have their wands checked, Professor. I thought, maybe we're headed the same way." Sargeras's gaze lingered on Harry a moment, then he nodded. "Indeed, then let's go together." Harry lowered his head and fell into step. "If I'm not mistaken," Sargeras said suddenly, "Holly, Phoenix Feather Corps?" Harry blinked in surprise and then nodded. "Yes, Professor." He tightened his grip on his wand without realizing it. Ron and Hermione caught up, panting, with Cedric Diggory close behind. "We just ran into Diggory," Hermione whispered. "We were hoping he knew something about the first task." Cedric gave them an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I don't know anything either. I'm just on my way to get my wand checked." Sargeras swept a glance over them, eyes finally settling on the wands in their hands. "Wands tell you a great deal about their owners," he said. "Often the wand chooses, not the wizard. Fate plays a part." The four looked at him, puzzled. Sargeras didn't answer in words at first. He simply pointed at Hermione's wand. "Vinewood, dragon heartstring." Hermione looked surprised and pleased. Vine is associated with foresight and the pursuit of knowledge. Dragon heartstring is power and grandeur. Sargeras inclined his head slightly. "A rare combination. Its owner will not be content with surface answers and will push into the unknown." Hermione beamed. Then his gaze moved to Ron, who had unconsciously tightened his hold. "Willow, unicorn hair," Sargeras said. "Willow is linked to healing and potential," he continued. "Unicorn hair stands for loyalty and purity. That's an excellent wand for talent, but its owner can lack confidence and be ruled by emotion." Ron flushed. "So I'm really talented?" "Yes," Sargeras replied evenly, "but you're a textbook example of being swayed by feeling." The others laughed, and Ron's face went an even deeper red. Cedric, curious, asked, "What about mine?" Sargeras glanced at his wand. "Ash, unicorn hair. Ash denotes steadfast faith. Unicorn hair, as I said, you tend toward noble ideals and chivalry, a strength but also a vulnerability." "Both a strength and a weakness," Cedric repeated, thoughtful. Harry, impatient, piped up, "Professor, you haven't said what my wand means." Sargeras didn't turn his head. "Holly is about spiritual questing. Phoenix Feather speaks of initiative and selectiveness. Someone with that pairing has clear aims and drive, but can be prone to emotional reactions." The four champions fell quiet, turning over his words. Hermione's eyes drifted to the wand Sargeras always carried, a translucent shaft that seemed carved from gray crystal, threaded with faint, shifting colors in the corridor light. "Professor," she asked, unable to hide her curiosity, "your wand, it's very unusual. I've never seen anything like that material." Ron, Harry, and Cedric all leaned in, fascinated. Sargeras appeared unbothered and raised his wand for a moment, letting them see it more clearly. "Everlasting flower wood," he said flatly. "It represents death. The core is confidential." "Everlasting flower?" Harry repeated, the name both beautiful and ominous. "Why call it everlasting if it represents death? What is that plant?" A faint glint hovered in Sargeras's gray eyes. He considered them for a moment, then explained in measured tones. "The everlasting flower does not celebrate life. It is an ill-omened bloom that grows on corpses. It thrives on decaying flesh and perishing souls. The ground it grows in must be watered with death. The more it feeds on life, the longer it blooms. The image froze them. A coldness seemed to creep down the corridor. Ron's face turned pale. Hermione covered her mouth, and even calm, Cedric looked shocked. Harry felt a chill run up his spine. He could not imagine what experiences had led a man to choose timber that fed on death. Sargeras took in their reactions without apparent sympathy. He closed his hand around his wand, a thin flash of displeasure crossing his face. They were not worth the explanation. His look said, "Why waste words on the vulgar?" "Anyway," he said, pulling them back to the present, "the staff room is this way. Don't keep Mr. Ollivander and the other judges waiting." Pushing open the thick wooden door of the staff room, they stopped the conversation inside, as if someone had cut the air. The room was crowded, clearly expanded by an undetectable extension charm, and full of people. The headmasters sat at a velvet-covered table. Champions from the other schools stood or perched on sofas, speaking in low tones. Ludo Bagman's hearty laugh and Barty Crouch's stern face were easy to spot, and standing near the center of the room, his silvery eyes bright, was the wandmaker Garrick Ollivander. "Ah, our Hogwarts champion and Professor Greengrass?" Bagman greeted enthusiastically, glancing at Sargeras with a flicker of confusion. "Just passing by," Sargeras said briefly, then moved to a sofa at the side and sat. Hermione and Ron lingered awkwardly in the doorway. Part of them wanted to leave, part of them were curious about the wand inspection. Sargeras caught sight of them and gestured. "Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger," he said, nodding toward the two empty seats. "Come sit here." Relieved, they slipped quietly onto the sofas. After a minute more, Dumbledore stood and clapped his hands to draw attention. "All right, everyone. All of the champions are present." With a gentle smile, he turned to Ollivander. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Garrick Ollivander. He is a renowned wandmaker in Europe," Dumbledore explained to the assembled champions. "He will now inspect your wands to ensure they are sound before the tournament." Ollivander wasted no time on pleasantries. His thin, gnarled fingers reached eagerly for the first wand. "Let us begin. Time is precious," he said. The inspection that followed felt like a miniature tour of wandcraft around the world. Ollivander's eyes lit up at the sight of unfamiliar designs. He began with the Durmstrang Champion's wands. Holding the roughly shaped wand up to the light, he hummed approvingly. "Hornbeam, dragon heartstring, yes?" Crumb nodded. Ollivander's tone shifted, more critical. "A Grigorovitch piece, without doubt. It seeks power first and finesse second. Always a touch, blunt." He stroked a small nick on the handle. "It's seen heavy duels, but the core is intact. Performance is excellent." There was a little professional rivalry in his words that made the Durmstrang contingent bristle. When Fleur Delacour stepped forward, she presented her wand with a careless elegance. Ollivander's brow lifted. "There is a Vila hair in this." "From my grandmother," Fleur said, smiling and nodding. "A very emotional core," he murmured, "suited to glamour and deceptive charms, exquisitely charming, but temperamental at times." He turned the wand over, satisfied. "Well kept, no wear in the shaft at all." The Ilvermorny champion produced a wand carved with thunderbird feather patterns. "From North America, likely wolf family, yes?" Ollivander guessed, peering closely. "Thunderbird tail feather," he said. "They aim for speed and power. Bold, even reckless. It can be unstable." He wiggled the wand and felt its vibrations. "Slight scorch marks at the tip. You practice powerful spells a lot. It will respond, but be careful. Frequent overloading shortens a wand's useful life." The Kunlun champion stepped forward with a wand inlaid with tiny bones and gemstones. Ollivander's expression grew respectful. "Eastern alchemy," he said softly. "They fuse parts of magical creatures into the wood, seeking unity between wielder and wand. Ancient work." He touched the inlays like a relic. "Structurally sound. Magic flows smoothly. Very impressive. Such craftsmanship is difficult to mend if ever damaged." The Castellabruxo champion offered a vibrant green wand. "South American, natural faction," Ollivander observed. "They treat the wand as a living extension, often carved while the wood is still living." He traced the grain with admiration. "Full of vitality, no cracks or rot, excellent condition." The Wagado champion's wand looked like polished bone from some deep-sea creature. "African traditions," Ollivander said with interest. They use materials and cores we in Europe seldom understand, very unique. He handled it with the same thorough respect as the others. He seemed to know the history and character of nearly every wand at a glance, and his concise evaluations impressed both champions and judges. Finally, it was the turn of the Hogwarts champions. Cedric stepped forward. Ollivander examined his ash wand tipped to handle. Ash, unicorn tail hair, very steady, well matched to you. When Harry took his turn and Ollivander saw the holly wand, the old man's face softened into something approaching a smile. Ah, this one. A wand destined for greatness. He coaxed a string of silvery sparks from the tip and nodded. Perfect condition, Mr. Potter, though you might wipe off those fingerprints. Harry flushed. He reached to wipe the wand on the hem of his robe, a clumsy little motion that drew a few snickers from the room. He set the wand back into his hand and, embarrassed, let his hand fall. At the side of the room, the Ilvermorny champion, Cuthbert Kowalski, was whispering to a tall girl with dark, curly hair. "Why isn't the principal inspecting the wands?" she whispered, nodding toward the head table. "He's from the Wolf family, and he's a judge here." Cuthbert glanced toward Ollivander, who was beginning to pack his tools. "Exactly, because he's a judge," he answered in a low voice. "He's part of the panel. He can't inspect the wands himself. That would raise questions about fairness." He paused, choosing his words. "Ollivander is widely regarded as Europe's authority on wands. Having him do the inspections avoids any hint of favoritism or doubt." Chapter 343, Competition Content. When the wand inspection ended, Mr. Ollivander stepped aside and began methodically straightening his records. Ludo Bagman cleared his throat, his round face spreading into a brilliant smile as he tried to capture everyone's attention. "Right, ladies and gentlemen, excellent wands, excellent champions," he called, his voice bright with enthusiasm. "Next, I'm sure you're all dying to know about the competition arrangements." He turned toward Mr. Barty Crouch, who remained stony-faced. "So, shall Barty announce the specific schedule for this Triwizard tournament?" Bagman implored, making a theatrical little pleading gesture. Barty Crouch's mouth tightened. He answered quickly and stiffly, "No, Bagman. This is within the remit of your Department of Magical Games and Sports. Don't push it all onto me." Bagman's smile flickered but rebounded, slightly strained. "Ah, of course. I'll introduce it to everyone," he laughed, trying to cover his embarrassment. He puffed out his chest and turned to the champions and judges. "Very well, I'll make the announcement." He flailed his arms to build suspense. "Competitors, you will face 3 tasks in this contest." He paused, scanning the anxious faces. "These 3 tasks are designed to test different qualities. The first will test your courage. The second will test your wisdom. And the final task," here he raised his voice for emphasis, "will be the ultimate trial of strength, not merely magical power, but strength of will and determination." The champions leaned forward, waiting for more detail. Bagman spread his hands and gave a helpless little smile. However, the precise contents of the tasks, to ensure absolute fairness and, of course, entertainment value, must be kept strictly confidential. They will only be revealed on the morning each task begins. A ripple of disappointed whispers swept the room. Only Harry, Ron, and Hermione felt a cold prickle of dread at the secrecy. It can't really be a dragon, Harry thought, but the more he considered the kinds of things that could test courage, the more convinced he became. Dragons. Of all the possibilities, what tested courage better than facing a dragon? Bagman carried on, oblivious to the murmurs. "So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, the first task, the Courage Challenge, will begin promptly next Tuesday morning. The location will be the floating arena at Hogwarts. All champions, please rest well and prepare." No sooner had he finished than the reporters, who had been waiting impatiently, swarmed forward like nifflers spotting galleons. Cameras and quick notes quills surrounded the champions in an instant. "Over here, champions. Look this way. Stand a bit closer. Mr. Crumb, smile. Well, it's all right if you don't. Miss Delacour, flick your hair. Yes, that's lovely." The reporters jabbered directions, attempting to stage the most photogenic poses. Harry felt like a puppet shoved into a tableau with the other champions. Flashbulbs popped, dazzling his eyes. Surprisingly, the least cooperative subject was Victor Crumb. He scowled, looking stiff and defensive, his body almost rigid as the reporters urged him into different poses. "Mr. Crumb, relax a bit," one of them begged. "These photos will be sent everywhere and printed in papers back home. Your family will see them. You ought to at least look like you're enjoying yourself." At that, Crumb's jaw loosened fractionally. He obliged with a reluctant turn, but his face still looked as if someone owed him a large sum of galleons. Harry felt a pang of sympathy, though he wasn't faring much better. His smiling muscles ached by the time the ordeal ended. When it was over, Headmaster Dumbledore motioned to the judges and champions to adjourn for a drink at the Three Broomsticks. Barty Crouch, however, again refused stiffly. "I must return to the ministry," he announced. "Although things here are settled, there's much to do, and one man, Weatherby, left alone in the office won't suffice." "Oh, Barty, stay for a drink," Bagman urged. Crouch shook his head, said a curt farewell, and left. "Write to me if anything arises," he added on his way out. After he left, Dumbledore led the champions and their heads of house out of the staff room. The Hogwarts professors lingered, exchanging remarks. "Courage. I expect this task will involve encountering something terrifying," Professor Flitwick squeaked, anxiety in his voice. Snape's lips twitched as he glanced at Harry, who was murmuring with Ron and Hermione. "Courage is Gryffindor's strong suit, after all," he said acidly. "It seems Mr. Potter will at last have the chance to demonstrate his famed courage. I trust he won't disappoint us." Professor McGonagall ignored the sarcasm and addressed Hermione sternly. "Miss Granger, have you been overly busy lately? Why is your last assignment not properly completed?" She picked up a roll of parchment from the table. Hermione's essay, neat and densely written. Hermione's face fell, and she began to explain in a hurried whisper. Ron, seeing McGonagall's serious expression, seized the moment to abandon his companions and slipped away. Before Hermione could finish, there was a sudden commotion at the staff room door. A figure barreled in, black hair slightly mussed, his handsome face creased with worry. Sirius Black strode across the room and stopped in front of Harry in a few quick bounds. "Harry!" he exclaimed, grabbing Harry's shoulders and searching him anxiously from head to toe. "Are you all right? I heard you'd been chosen as a champion. What happened? Why didn't you write to tell me?" Seeing his godfather set something warm and steady in Harry's chest, Harry felt both glad and slightly overwhelmed by the torrent of questions. "I did write, Sirius," he said quickly. "The night my name came out of the Goblet of Fire, I wrote to you. But Hedwig has been sulking these last few days. She refused to deliver my letter. I tried a few times, but she turned her back on me, so I had to wait until she was in a better mood." Sirius blinked in surprise at the cause, and the tension around his face eased a little, though his brow was still worried. He put an arm around Harry and lowered his voice. "Set the letter aside for now. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. I have a bad feeling about this." He looked toward the professors. "Can Harry leave with me now?" Professor McGonagall inclined her head to signal assent, but before she could speak, a cold voice cut in. "I was just about to ask that question," Snape said sarcastically. "When are you two leaving? This is the staff room, not your sitting room." Chapter 344. Scout Loctus. Just as Sirius led Harry away and Hermione was trying to explain to Professor McGonagall why her homework had suddenly slipped in quality, no one noticed a fly-sized dark shadow slip silently from the staff room and melt into the crowd's feet. Loctus, in its tiny form, beat its almost silent wings like a speck of dust on the wind and kept close to Igor Karkaroff as he strode out of the castle with a sullen face. Karkaroff was clearly in a foul mood. He did not return with the other Durmstrang students to the great ship anchored on the Black Lake. Instead, he walked alone along the lakeshore. His silver-white hair fluttered, a little disordered in the cold wind. Loctus used the shadows of grass and rocks, keeping its distance but following him all the way. The Durmstrang ship loomed on the water like a beached leviathan. Karkaroff boarded without disturbing anyone and went straight to his captain's cabin. The cabin matched him, dilapidated and gloomy. Ancient sea charts hung on the walls, the wooden furniture dark from years of damp, the edges starting to rot. The window didn't close tightly. Cold lake air seeped through the cracks with a faint moan. An oil lamp on the table flickered and guttered, throwing distorted shadows that swayed across the walls. Karkaroff slammed the door shut with his back as if trying to shut out the whole of Hogwarts. He leaned against it, chest heaving, trying to suppress something. Then he strode to the center of the room and roughly pulled up the sleeve of his left arm. Under the dim, stuttering light, the skin of his forearm was exposed. Branded there was a skull with a snake emerging from its mouth, the dark mark, the sign of a Death Eater. Loctis landed silently on a high, dusty beam, hiding perfectly in the shadows. Its sharp, raven-like eyes pierced the gloom and fixed on the scene below. Karkaroff stared at the mark, his breathing growing increasingly ragged. The mark was clearer than it had been, no longer a vague stain, but a defined brand, with an ominous dark red tint beginning to show. Damn it, he finally exploded. The dam of his suppressed rage broke. He stopped looking at the mark and began pacing the small room like a caged animal, his voice trembling and raw. "You pompous old bat," he snarled, slamming his fist down on the table with a dull crack. "Who do you think you are? Hiding under Dumbledore's robes, do you really think you're some sort of white wizened saint?" He stopped, turned to the air as if Severus Snape stood before him, teeth bared as he spat the words. "Damn it, aren't we the same? We both served him once. We made the same choice." His face was a mixture of fear and fury. And to look at me like that, with that disgusting expression, then just say, "No comment," he roared. "To hell with no comment. Why do you put on that high and mighty act in front of me? Why won't you tell me anything? If we don't unite, if he really does come back, we'll all die without a grave." He gasped, then as if remembering another enemy, his anger shifted. "And Mad-Eye Moody, that paranoid old lunatic, the way he looks at me, like he's ready to yank out his wand and hex me. He must know something. He must be watching me." Karkaroff slipped into paranoid frenzy, one moment cursing Snape's betrayal and arrogance, the next convinced Moody was surveilling him and waiting to mete out punishment. To Karkaroff, Snape, another man with a compromised past, should have been a natural ally, but instead he drew a clear line. That sting of rejection filled Karkaroff with more fear and fury than any external threat. On the beam, Loctis watched silently, imprinting every uncontrolled word, every frightened and enraged expression. The entire one-man show in Karkaroff's cabin was transmitted to Sargeras without a single detail lost. When Sargeras saw the dark mark sharp and clear on Karkaroff's arm, he understood. "So that's it," he murmured. "The Death Eater mark is coming back to life. It looks like some of the old brands are heating up again. The Death Eaters must sense Lord Voldemort regaining some strength, maybe not fully returned, but enough to stir the marks." Voldemort had not yet fully revived, far from his old power, but the change in the mark was a dangerous signal for those who bore it. Karkaroff was terrified by that change. He saw enemies everywhere, mistakenly believing the Dark Lord had returned and frantically seeking refuge among his supposed peers. Sargeras noted, regretfully, that Snape was not the sort to join Karkaroff in panic. He sent a brief instruction to Loctis. "Keep watching him." The mosquito-sized raven flexed its claws on the beam, acknowledging the command. Meanwhile, at the edge of the Quidditch pitch, Harry walked with Sirius. "This is definitely a conspiracy, Harry," Sirius said flatly, his face grave. "Someone wants to put you in terrible danger. The Goblet of Fire rarely errs, but it can be tricked." Harry nodded. Sargeras's assessment pointed the same way, and Sirius's conviction made his stomach tighten. "Don't be afraid," Sirius said, placing a steady hand on Harry's shoulder. "I'll be watching every match. Dumbledore will do everything he can to protect you and discover the truth. And don't be fooled by Mad-Eye. Alastor Moody may look frightening, but he's a seasoned Auror. Dealing with dark arts and plots like this is his specialty. He's here largely to prevent exactly this sort of thing." He hesitated, then added, "Also, Professor Greengrass, though I don't know him well, is powerful and will probably help when it matters." As Harry absorbed this, heavy footsteps thudded behind them. "Harry, I need a word with you." Hagrid's voice dropped when he saw Sirius, and his enormous presence physically shaded them as he bent down and whispered conspiratorially. "Listen, Harry, I've been thinking a long time about whether to tell you. The first task, well, what you'll be facing is dragons." He hissed the last word, half anxious, half absurdly excited. Harry's heart sank. He had suspected as much, but confirmation hit like a bucket of ice. Terrifying images of dragons crowded his mind. Hagrid patted his shoulder in what was meant to be comfort. The force nearly knocked Harry off balance. "Don't worry, Harry. There'll be a way," Hagrid mumbled, then hurried off, as if he had completed an important errand. Chapter 345, New Discovery Night, draped the Forbidden Forest in a heavy, mysterious hush. Moonlight fought through the tangled branches, throwing mottled shadows across the leaf-strewn path. Occasional calls from unseen owls echoed in the distance, only deepening the silence. Hagrid's enormous silhouette loomed in the dim light like a moving hill. He tried to soften his footsteps, but the dry twigs still snapped under his weight with a soft crunch. Beside him, Madame Olympe moved with stately grace. Her tall figure looked elegant and dignified in the moonlight. Hagrid's cheeks were flushed, hard to make out in the dark, but his voice held an unusual tenderness and eagerness. "Olympe, the night's lovely, isn't it? There are so many interesting creatures in the forest. If you like, I could bring you to see them sometime." He rubbed his huge hands together. Madame Olympe tilted her head and gave a worried smile. "That sounds wonderful, Rubeus. I'm sure with you as a guide it would be both safe and fascinating." She sighed softly, and the worry returned. "It's just, when I think of the Beauxbatons students, I can't quite enjoy the view. They don't know what's coming, and as headmistress I cannot rest." A faint flush showed on Hagrid's face, even in the moonlight. His beard trembled as he frowned in sympathy. "Oh, don't worry, Olympe. Professor Dumbledore will put safety first, I'm sure. The tasks might be tough, but I don't think there'll be any danger to life." His voice trailed off as a shadow passed across his expression, as if he'd suddenly remembered something. Madame Olympe caught the hesitation instantly. She stopped and turned toward him, her tall frame cutting a silhouette against the trees. Her large eyes fixed on him, an expression of worry threaded with trust. "Rubeus," she said, her voice going soft, almost pleading, "we all know you're not only the care of magical creatures professor at Hogwarts, but one of Dumbledore's most trusted people. There are few secrets of this castle and its grounds you don't know." She leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "About the first task, have you heard anything? I don't need specifics, just a hint, something to tell the children so they can prepare. It would put my mind at ease." Faced with her earnest worry and that quiet confidence in him, Hagrid's simple defenses melted. He glanced around to make sure they were alone, then leaned closer. He thought he was whispering, but his voice carried farther than he meant. "All right, Olympe, I'll tell you, on one condition. You've got to keep it a secret. No one can know I told you." He emphasized it, breath heavy with nervousness. "It's dragons. They've brought several, different breeds, each proper ill-tempered. The champions have to take something from them." I didn't hear exactly what, though. Shock and understanding flashed across Madame Olympe's face, but she masked it quickly, smoothing her expression back into worried gratitude. She reached out and patted Hagrid's thick forearm with a well-manicured hand. "Thank you, Rubeus," she said softly. "You have no idea what this means to me for Beauxbatons. You are a most reliable and trustworthy friend." Hagrid's face broke into a hapless grin of pleasure and shyness. Any guilt about sharing the secret vanished. He felt proud to help her. The night, the forest, and the closeness of the moment settled around them like a private thing. Back in Gryffindor Tower, the common room fire had burned low, only embers glowed. Most students had gone to bed, but 3 were still awake, huddled in a corner. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were squeezed together on an armchair, each with a thick book open in their laps. The news about dragons burned in Harry's mind. He was restless and wanted to do something. They'd scoured the books, but found no reliable way to deal with dragons. Most solutions needed a group chanting a complex spell together. Harry sighed and slid a worn parchment from his robe pocket, the Marauder's map. Tiny ink dots moved across its surface, each labeled with a name. Harry's eyes dropped toward the Black Lake and the Durmstrang ship moored there. He scanned the small cluster of names on the ship for Karkaroff. Victor Krumm's name bobbed in one of the cabins, as if asleep, but Igor Karkaroff's name wasn't there. "He's not on the ship?" Harry said, his heart lurching. Ron and Hermione leaned over, eyes wide. "Not again?" Ron's voice was tight. "It's so late. Where could he be?" They shifted their attention to Snape's dungeon office. Severus Snape's name sat alone in his office, still. Perhaps he was grading or brewing something. At least Snape appeared to be where he belonged, but Karkaroff wasn't. Hermione's brow stayed furrowed as she scanned the map methodically. Then she suddenly froze, finger trembling as she pointed to a small room not far from Snape's office, his private potion storage room, the one rumored to hold rare and dangerous ingredients. "Wait," she breathed. "Here, look." Harry and Ron followed her finger. In that tiny square on the map, a name stood out, Barty Crouch. The name inked on the map stood out like a flare. Barty Crouch. Harry blinked hard, wondering if the day's nerves were finally getting to him. He had heard Professor Dumbledore dismiss the staff room meeting that afternoon. Mr. Crouch had announced in a stiff, officious voice that he would be returning to the Ministry of Magic at once to deal with a pile of papers. Everyone had heard it. And yet the Marauder's map showed the Director of Magical Law Enforcement, who should have been back in his London office, inside Hogwarts Castle, moving in the cramped square labeled Professor Snape's Potion Store Room. Why was he sneaking back into the castle in the dead of night and heading into Snape's territory? The tiny ink dot marked Barty Crouch moved within the storage room, pausing, turning, tracking as if searching the shelves. It was far too strange. A cold suspicion crawled up their spines. Hermione's earlier remark, "And there's one other person whose behavior I find a bit strange," flashed back like an alarm bell. Harry forced his voice steady. "Hermione, you thought he was odd before." "Yes," she said, unusually grave. "I wasn't imagining it. There's something wrong." Curiosity, fear, and the need to know the truth passed between them in a single look. Ron hesitated, chewing, then muttered, "Should we tell Dumbledore in the morning?" He swallowed the last of his fried fish. "No," Harry said quickly, decisive. He drew the shimmering invisibility cloak from his robes. "He could be gone by morning, or he'll have wiped whatever he wants wiped. If we watch now, we might discover what he's up to." "This is too dangerous," Hermione objected immediately. "If we're caught, we've got the Marauder's map and the cloak," Harry countered. He tried for confidence. "We can avoid everyone if we're careful." Hermione's eyes dropped to the little dot that still moved on the map, then up to Harry's determined green eyes. She knew his stubbornness. This could be a rare chance. She took a deep breath, as if setting herself on a cliff edge. "All right, but we must be extremely careful. The instant anything goes wrong, we get out. No heroics." "Fine." Harry stuffed the map into his inner robe pocket and with a flourish, spread the cloak over them. Night seemed to swallow them. Their forms vanished entirely, more completely than any disillusionment charm. They slipped out of the Gryffindor common room and into the castle's sleeping corridors. Moonlight cut cold bands across the flagstones. They tiptoed, feet whispering on old boards. The hems of their robes brushed the floor. A few portraits stirred, glancing blankly at an empty corridor where a sound had been, then going back to sleep. Hermione recalled what Professor Sargeras had said in class. Sound, scent, even the air you push as you move can all betray you. She drew her wand beneath the cloak and murmured, "Muffliato." A faint, protective hum wrapped around them, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of fabric, everything vanished. Ron and Harry exchanged amazed looks and a quick thumbs up for Hermione. They descended a spiral stone staircase leading deeper into the dungeons. Then below, a sharp, suspicious meow sliced the silence. A gray shape padded up, Madame Norris. Her nose twitched. Her amber eyes surveyed the empty stairwell and then fixed with impossible accuracy on the spot beneath their cloak. The greasy scent of Ron's fried fish left in his pocket bloomed in the tight air. Madame Norris began to circle, tail high, claws extended, intent on an invisible presence. Under the cloak, the three of them froze. Ron, panicked, tried to boot the cat away. He misjudged. Instead of scaring it off, he drew the cat's interest and made it more alert. Madame Norris let out a long, sharp meow that rang cruelly in the dungeon. "What's going on, my dear?" a hoarse voice croaked as footsteps shuffled. Filch appeared on the stairwell, holding a dim oil lamp. His sour face was lit beneath its little pool of light. Madame Norris wound around his legs, then darted back to the corner where Ron had been, meowing insistently. Filch peered into the empty space. "Who's there?" he barked, voice echoing off stone. "Peeves! Up to mischief, are you? Out you come!" Thinking fast, Ron fumbled and threw the grease-stained paper from his pocket toward a dark corner. It arced and landed with a soft thud. Madame Norris's meow ceased. She sniffed and bounded to the fish. Filch's attention flicked to the corner. "Peeves, is that your rubbish?" he muttered suspiciously, raising his lamp. Footsteps came from another corridor. Like a shadow emerging into the light, Professor Snape slid into view, his black robes whispering. "Filch," he said flatly, "what's all this shouting about? It is long past curfew." "Professor Snape!" Filch seized on him like a man rescued. "It's Peeves again, sir. Making a mess." He pointed at Madame Norris, hunched over the fried fish. Snape's dark eyes swept from Filch to the corner, and then to the greasy tidbit. A sneer, thin and almost amused, twisted his mouth. "It could not be Peeves," he said coolly. "He is presently being disciplined by our diligent Professor Greengrass in the floating arena. Peeves cannot leave without permission." "But Peeves goes through walls," Filch protested, unconvinced. "Professor Greengrass's method of confinement is rather effective," Snape said, but his gaze cut through the stairwell like a knife, inspecting the shadows, the steps, the ceiling. "I am more inclined to think this is a group of students out of bounds on a nocturnal excursion. Perhaps they are using forbidden magic." The air seemed to harden around them. Filch, lamp held like a weapon, followed Snape's cold sweep, peering into every shadow. Under the cloak, Harry, Ron, and Hermione froze entirely. Breath held, muscles locked, cold sweat soaking their backs. 347. Chapter 347, Tit for Tat. Just as Snape's sharp gaze was about to pin down the invisible hiding place, another rough voice cut across the corridor and broke the tense silence. "Quite the late-night gathering, isn't it?" Alastor Moody limped up from another passage, his wooden leg thumping a steady thump-thump on the flagstones. His magical eye spun wildly, sweeping first over Filch and Snape, and then Harry, Ron, and Hermione felt their hearts stop. The eye seemed to pierce the invisibility cloak as if it were nothing, pausing for a heartbeat on their three pale faces. The stare was startlingly clear and intrusive. For a moment, they were sure they'd been discovered, but Moody's magical iris casually rolled away and fixed instead on Snape's pale features. "Severus," Moody growled, his tone rough and assessing, "and Argus, throwing a little tea party in the dungeons at this hour? Or have you found someone suspicious?" He deliberately stressed the words, "someone suspicious." Snape's expression grew even colder, his thin lips a rigid line. "Professor Moody," he said icily, voice like the chill of the dungeons, "I'm dealing with some minor nocturnal disturbances. It seems a few students are breaking curfew, attempting unauthorized exploration of the castle." His gaze flicked once in the direction of the cloak. Moody's magical eye followed, but he waved it off. "Students? Exploring at this hour?" He took a step forward, one normal eye fixed on Snape. The implication was unmistakable. Snape himself was the most suspicious person in his sight. Snape's jaw tightened. He answered with brittle calm. "Professor Moody, you seem overly eager to suspect me. In these delicate times, your vigilance might be better applied elsewhere." "Elsewhere, eh?" Moody snorted. "Like certain individuals with dubious histories who might still be tempted by the call of their old master?" The remark hit Snape like a burn. The air around him seemed to cool. Fury flared in his black eyes, but he kept it under a controlled surface. "My loyalty has been tested," he said coldly. "You, Professor Moody, have become so paranoid you hear rustling in every shadow. Perhaps your time at the Ministry has left some after-effects." He lifted his chin with a thin, deliberate arrogance. "Not everyone treats colleagues like criminals, and Dumbledore has his judgment. I happen to be one of the few he trusts." "Trust?" Moody scoffed. "Trust is earned, Severus." He took a ragged breath. "And at a time like this, I hope whatever trust you claim doesn't waver for reasons I needn't spell out." A twitch ran through Snape's cheek. He understood perfectly what Moody meant, both the allusion to his Death Eater past and to the hidden dangers rippling through Hogwarts. The two men faced each other with the cold war of mutual suspicion. Filch shuffled awkwardly to one side, glancing between them, clutching his oil lamp. He kept silent, visibly uneasy. Snape's jaw remained stone hard. He drew a measured breath, and with every ounce of control asked shortly, "I have no interest in playing these games, Moody." He spoke low, each word an effort to preserve dignity. "If you are so concerned about rustlings, be my guest. I have potion ingredients to attend to." He flicked his black robes, turned, and swept down the corridor toward the potion store, disappearing into the gloom. Filch watched him go, then, visibly relieved, muttered, Well, I won't keep you, Professor Moody. I must take Madame Norris to patrol elsewhere." He snatched up the cat, which had been fixed on something nearby, and hurried off in Snape's opposite direction. Silence settled on the stairwell. Only Moody and the 3 teenagers under the cloak remained. Thump, thump, his wooden leg sounded as he approached the hiding place and stopped. The magical eye stopped its restless spinning and trained itself directly on the 3 faces beneath the invisibility cloak. His normal eye swept the corridor once to make sure no one else was present. "Come out," he said quietly, but with the weight of command. "Don't think that thing will fool me." Harry, Ron, and Hermione's hearts sank. It was over. They had been found. Harry, knowing there was no point staying hidden, slowly lifted the cloak. The 3 of them appeared on the stairs, flushed and tense. Moody's magical eye fell on the parchment clutched in Harry's hand, the Marauder's map, and his thick eyebrows rose. "What's that?" he demanded, his gaze flicking across the moving ink in tiny annotations. Harry instinctively tried to hide it behind him, but Moody's scarred hand was already out, steady and sure. Sirius's words flickered through Harry's mind. Alastor Moody can be trusted. Dumbledore trusts him. Then Harry handed the map over. "It's the Marauder's map, sir. It shows everyone's location in the castle." Moody took it and studied the crawling ink with careful, silent interest. His face was unreadable, but they could feel his concentration tighten. "So it really is something extraordinary," he murmured. "Yes," Harry said. "It helped us catch Peter Pettigrew back then." Moody's gaze lifted like a torch. "Explain yourselves. Out after hours, breaking rules, hiding under an invisibility cloak, and wandering the castle with that map. You weren't out for a stroll, were you?" "We," Ron blurted, pointing at the map in Moody's hand. "We saw a name. Barty Crouch was on the map, down by Snape's storeroom. But Mr. Crouch said he was returning to the Ministry this afternoon. We thought it was strange, so we wanted to see what he was doing." Moody's one eye narrowed, and he peered down at the map again. The lines of his face tightened as if pulling taut. "Barty Crouch," he repeated in a low voice, as though spitting the name into the air. His magical eye spun once, sweeping the empty dungeon to make sure there were no eavesdroppers. Then he turned back to the 3 of them, his expression suddenly very serious. "What else did you see?" "Nothing else, Professor," Harry said quickly. "We were about to check the storeroom, but Madame Norris blocked us. Then Professor Snape came, and then you did." Moody nodded slowly. He glanced down at the map. "He's not there now," he said. "The potion storeroom is empty, but this does remind me of something." "Professor Moody," Hermione asked before she could stop herself, "why would Mr. Crouch be in Snape's storeroom?" Moody's magical eye swung up and pinned them with an intense look, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I can hazard a guess," he said quietly. "People think I'm obsessive about catching dark wizards. Compared to Barty Crouch, I'm practically mild." He exhaled with a weary sigh. "I could never have sent my own son to Azkaban. That kind of thing changes a man." "So you think Crouch would be here because he suspected Snape?" Hermione said, catching at the thought. "It's possible," Moody agreed. "After all, Harry's name turning up in the Goblet of Fire means Hogwarts isn't as safe as it seems." He held the map up. "I'll need to borrow this. There are a few things I've got to confirm. If someone's moving about in the shadows, I intend to find out." He looked at Harry. "Is that all right?" Harry hesitated, then nodded. "How long do you need it?" "Not long," Moody said, a tight smile for a moment. "I have a feeling it won't be long." He lowered his voice. "That's enough for tonight. You 3, go straight back to the tower. Forget everything you saw here. About Crouch, about this map, about being out tonight. Don't tell anyone. I'll look into it." He scanned each of their faces to make sure they understood. Harry tried to speak, but Moody cut him off with a sharp, "No buts, Potter. This is not something you should meddle in. It's far more dangerous than you imagine. Your priority is to get through the competition safely. Back to bed, at once." Moody slipped the Marauder's map into his pocket, shot them a final look with his one ordinary eye, and with the magical eye turning once toward the path to Gryffindor Tower, signaled them to go. Trembling, they put the cloak back on and slipped away. Even through the fabric, Harry had the eerie feeling of that strange, unblinking eye watching them until they vanished round the stairwell. Moody stood alone. His wooden leg thunked against the stone. He glanced toward Snape's storeroom, then down at his prosthetic limb, shadows darkening his weathered face. "Not yet," he muttered, and a hard glint shone in his eye. "Not yet." 348. Jang was kept in the dark. The next morning, as they made their way to the Great Hall for breakfast, Harry leaned toward Ron and Hermione and whispered, "We have to tell Professor Greengrass about what happened last night." "What?" Ron stopped in his tracks, surprise written all over his face. "But Harry, didn't we promise Professor Moody last not to tell a soul?" "Ron," Hermione said calmly, "this is different." "I thought that was a promise," Ron snapped, brow furrowing. "How can you break your word so quickly?" Hermione arched an eyebrow. "Didn't we also promise Professor McGonagall we'd stop breaking school rules? You only just lost 20 points last week for arguing with Snape." "That's true." Ron's expression shifted as he took that in. "So when are we going to tattle on Moody, then?" "It's not tattling," Hermione protested, cheeks flushing a little. "It's reporting." They hurried to Sargeras's office and told him, all at once and in a jumbled rush, what had happened in the cellar the night before. Sargeras listened with a calm, almost unreadable expression as they bounced from one detail to the next. Barty Crouch turning up in Snape's storeroom late at night? Sargeras watched the three of them, anxious, earnest, and silently sipped his teacup while his mind raced. Snape had already told him about the storeroom theft. African tree snake skin and lace wings gone. Of the potion recipes Sargeras knew, only one used both ingredients. Polyjuice potion. Why would a head of department risk stealing those materials at Hogwarts? Wouldn't there be official requisition records? Hermione added the small details quietly. Sargeras's gaze flicked from her worried face to Harry and Ron. Moody taking the Marauder's map could be explained as part investigation, reasonable in itself. "But, Professor," Harry interrupted softly, "do you think Professor Moody—" Sargeras looked at Harry and said evenly, "Alastair Moody is an experienced Auror. He knows what he's doing." He didn't finish the sentence, and it was that omission that made some of his actions feel oddly cautious. A brief silence settled. Sargeras turned to the window. The castle lay quiet in the morning light, but beneath its calm he sensed stirring undercurrents. Karkaroff's late-night meetings with Snape, Barty Crouch's strange behavior, Moody's evasiveness, too many people with their own motives seemed to be converging here. He set his teacup down, fingertips tapping the desk. "I'll look into it." "And for now?" Harry asked. "You need to focus on preparing for the competition," Sargeras replied, his gaze lingering on Harry. "The first task is soon. Don't let other things distract you." He watched the three of them go, still anxious, and thought to himself these were burdens they shouldn't have to carry. After they left, he walked slowly to the window, gray eyes narrowing. At the right moment, a little legitimacy might reveal the truth behind Crouch's oddness. Moody's magical eye, too, deserved a check. The castle bells chimed. Sargeras gathered his lesson plans and left the office. Over the next few days, the Hogwarts library became Harry, Ron, and Hermione's second home. They camped at a long table by the stacks, surrounded by dog-eared tomes, common dragons and their characteristics, a guide to dragon training, 100 ways to survive an unfortunate encounter with a dragon. Just the titles made their stomachs turn. "We need to find the weakest spot," Hermione whispered, tracing a detailed dragon anatomy illustration. "The eyes are usually a good target, but they're the most dangerous." Harry was trying to make sense of a complicated description of Hungarian horntail venom when he noticed movement nearby. Fleur Delacour and Felinda Lorania of Beauxbatons drifted by, Fleur pulling a copy of Studies on the Habits of Mediterranean Dragons from the Dangerous Species section, a rare worry creasing her features. Harry and Ron exchanged a look of surprise. Not long after, Victor Crumb, grim-faced, borrowed 3 hefty dragon volumes under Madame Pince's watchful eye. As he passed their table, his gaze met theirs for a heartbeat. No surprise, only the cold intensity of a champion preparing for battle. Soon, other schools' champions were streaming through the stacks, all heading for dragon-related bookshelves. "They all know," Hermione said, lowering her quill, brows knitting. Ron's mouth hung open as he watched Crumb walk away. "No way. How did they find out?" "Hagrid wouldn't have." He stopped, then muttered, "Secrets spread faster than we thought." Hermione's eyes were a mix of disappointment and concern. For the principals, their champions come first. They wouldn't care if that meant an unfair advantage. A wave of frustration and unease washed over Harry. The library felt less like a refuge of learning now than a quiet battlefield. Every corner held opponents, every dragon book borrowed a declaration of war. Their carefully kept secret had leaked. Harry's eyes fell on Cedric Diggory, sitting by a window with a pile of history of magic essays. The Hufflepuff prefect's brow was creased in concentration. He looked focused and entirely unaware of the dragon challenge. Dumbledore, Harry thought, would not have quietly informed his champion of the task like some of the other schools had, and Cedric didn't have friends like Hagrid. A complicated feeling rose in Harry's chest. Cedric was his rival at Hogwarts, telling him would reduce Harry's advantage. But he shouldn't be kept in the dark, Harry said quietly, suddenly certain. Ron spun around, incredulous. What did you say? Tell him. He's your opponent. Have you forgotten how people in his house treated you? Exactly, Harry said, meeting Ron's gaze. That's precisely why I should tell him. Everyone else knows, and he doesn't. That's not fair. Hermione looked at Harry with approval in her eyes, but warned, It's noble, Harry, but we must be careful. We can't let anyone know we were the ones who leaked it. Hagrid would be in trouble. We don't have to blurt it out, Harry said, an idea already forming. He glanced at Cedric's solitary figure. Just a hint obvious enough for him to put together, like saying other champions have been reading dragon books. During the short afternoon break, Harry stopped Cedric in the corridor that led to the Hufflepuff common room. Cho Chang and a few friends had just left him. He was alone, carrying History of Magic volumes. Cedric, Harry said, throat tight, can I talk to you for a moment? Cedric turned, and seeing Harry, showed a flash of surprise that softened into friendliness. Of course, Harry. What's up? Harry made sure no one else was nearby and spoke low and quick. It's about the first task. I don't know if you've noticed, but lately the dangerous species section in the library has been getting a lot of attention from the other school's champions. Cedric raised an eyebrow, puzzled, but listened. Harry let his eyes flick to the stack Cedric carried. Especially the dragon books. The other champions have been studying dragons a lot. He watched Cedric's face for a reaction. The initial confusion faded into dawning understanding and then a serious, measured look. Cedric wasn't slow. Harry's pointed hint and the fact that other champions were concentrating their research on dragons made the implication plain. Cedric was silent for a few seconds, then met Harry's eyes with a complicated expression, surprise tinged with something like gratitude. I understand, Cedric said finally, voice steady, though Harry heard the ripple beneath. Thank you for telling me, Potter. I appreciate it. He gave a small, sincere nod. I won't forget your help. Harry felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It's nothing, he said, trying to keep his tone casual. Everyone else seems to know, and you were the only one left out. I thought you should know. A pause, then Cedric smiled, a genuine, warm expression. Seems I need to update my reading list. Thanks again, Potter. He clapped Harry on the shoulder and hurried toward the library. Harry watched him go, a feeling he couldn't name stirring inside. He had expected panic or anger. Instead, Cedric had accepted the news with the calm of someone already figuring out his next move. You're more of a champion than I am, Harry thought, as he watched Cedric disappear into the stacks. You've probably already worked out how to handle a dragon. Chapter 349, Quarterfinals. Time seemed to rush as if under a charm, and soon it was Tuesday. The morning air was cold and crisp, and tension hung on everyone's cheeks. At the edge of the Quidditch pitch, the enormous suspended arena, like an inverted wizard's hat, cast an ominous shadow in the dim dawn. The stands were packed. Banners from the 8 schools fluttered above the surging crowd. The roar of conversation and excited chatter sounded like thousands of bees buzzing in the biting air. Sargeras sat among the professors' seats, not in the front row but with a clear view of the whole arena. His steady gaze took in the scene. 16 champions stood inside small, magically formed dark rooms at the arena's edge. Some were pale, clutching their wands with white knuckles and whispering prayers. Others tried to hide their nerves behind indifferent faces. On the other side of the field, behind a shimmering curtain of containment spells, several colossal creatures shifted restlessly. Dragon scales flashed with a cold metallic sheen in the sparse sunlight. Sulfur rolled from their heavy breaths. Occasional sparks and muffled growls sent ripples through the stands. 9 dragons of varying breeds lounged, their thick tails cutting deep grooves in the ground. Today, they were both the judges of this trial of courage and the nightmare each champion had to face. In the referee's box, Ludo Bagman rose. He drew his wand, pointed it at his throat, and his voice surged, amplified across the arena with theatrical flair. "Silence! Please be quiet. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished guests." He spread his arms and beamed with a practiced smile. Welcome to the first event of this year's Triwizard, oh no, the 8-school tournament." A round of laughter eased the tension for a moment. Bagman's voice took on a sing-song pitch. "I'm sure everyone is impatient. Before our champions demonstrate their courage, allow me, Ludo Bagman, on behalf of the organizing committee and the referees, to announce the rules and precautions for this task." The stands fell silent, and every ear turned toward him. Bagman pointed his wand at the dragon's enclosure, and his voice carried with relish. "As you can see, our champions will face these beautiful yet dangerous creatures, dragons." Despite all the rumors and speculation, official confirmation drew a collective gasp and excited screams. Bagman continued, "The rules are as follows. Each champion's objective is to retrieve from beside the dragon to which they are assigned a golden egg." As he spoke, Bagman produced a glittering golden object, about the size of an ostrich egg, and held it up for the crowd. This golden egg contains clues for the second task. It is crucial. The dragons guard their eggs in their nests. Among them is the golden egg you see here. Champions must use their magic, and most importantly, their courage. Use every means at your disposal to obtain the egg. As everyone knows, the suspended arena can mitigate fatal outcomes, but it cannot guarantee that champions will emerge unscathed. After deliberation, the organizing committee has adjusted the arena's protective spells so that teleportation out of the arena will be activated only if a contestant or dragon sustains potentially fatal injuries. We cannot guarantee absolute safety. Injuries are possible. Nervous hands tightened in the stands. Bagman went on. The order of appearance will be decided by drawing lots. Champions will enter one by one and face dragons assigned at random by the ancient dueling stone tablet. Judges will score each champion on time, use of magic, and displayed courage. He swept his gaze over the arena and then toward the young champions. Remember, young ladies and gentlemen, this is not merely a competition, but a trial. The honor of Hogwarts, Durmstrang, Beauxbatons, Ilvermorny, Ouagadougou, Castello Bruxo, Kunlun, and Ouagadougou rests on your shoulders. Good luck. With a dramatic flourish of his wand, a red spark shot into the sky and burst into countless shimmering stars. And now, I declare the first event of the 8-school tournament officially open. First champion, prepare yourself. A wave of cheers and applause crashed through the stands. Sagres leaned back, eyes calm on the arena, though he noticed Barty Crouch's seat in the referee's box was empty. Bagman had told the professors that Crouch was ill and recuperating at home. Sagres remained skeptical and resolved to visit Crouch after the competition. Bagman's voice rang out again as the uproar subsided. The moment has arrived. The dueling stone tablet will assign opponents fairly and at random. The suspended arena can simulate each dragon's natural environment. Remember, the teleportation safeguard will only trigger in the case of potentially fatal injury, and we hope it won't be needed. The door to the first dark room opened, and the Castello Bruxo champion, Diego Rodriguez, stepped out. Tall, well-built, his bronzed skin striking in the dim light, Diego held a look of solemn concentration. He strode to the tall dueling stone tablet at the arena's center, placed his palm on the cold stone, and chanted in a deep, controlled voice. Ancient runes along the tablet glowed in sequence. Slowly, the tablet sank into the ground. The arena shuddered as the floor rippled and reshaped itself like a disturbed pool. The once flat stone gave way to rough rocks and hardy tundra vegetation. A cold current swept across the field, carrying a stinging chill and a hint of salty sea breeze. A leaden sky hung low, weak rays of sunlight pierced the clouds and lit a newly formed dragon's nest. In the very center, coiled and watchful, was Diego's opponent, a fully grown Norwegian ridgeback. Bagman's commentary crackled with excitement. A Norwegian ridgeback's nest? Champion Rodriguez's draw is unfortunate. The Ridgeback is known for its ferocity and cunning. The Ridgeback's immense body was like a small mountain covered in obsidian scales, muscles coiled for explosive power. Along its spine ran a row of spikes like daggers, glinting ominously in the dim light. Its broad wings folded against its sides, the bony spurs along the edges visible. Eyes of dark gold, vertical pupils like molten metal, fixed coldly on the small human who had invaded its territory. "Look," Bagman added, "the Ridgeback's back is full of spikes that can pierce most armor. Its flames burn bright blue, intensely hot and extremely dangerous. It is the worst-tempered and most bloodthirsty of the dragon breeds, dangerous even to its own kind. Champion Rodriguez must be very careful." The Ridgeback answered with a threatening roar. Hot, sulphurous breath steamed from its nostrils, and its heavy tail scraped the rocks with a grating sound. Diego stopped at the edge of the nest. The dragon shifted, revealing a crude nest of rocks and earth. From his vantage point, Diego could see several large, spotted eggs. One shimmered with an alluring golden glow. The Ridgeback did not immediately lunge. It lowered its bulk slightly and raised the spikes along its back, watching the intruder as if assessing him. Diego stood at the rim of the nest, wand angled low toward the ground, his expression solemn. He understood the gravity of the opponent before him. 350, Norwegian Spinosaurus. Facing the Norwegian Ridgeback coiled like a mountain in the center of its nest, Diego Rodriguez did not approach rashly. Even someone seeing this creature for the first time would know that close-quarters combat was suicide. He drew a steady breath of the cold, sulfur-scented air, raised his wand, and intoned an old, lilting spell, a unique form of plant magic taught at Castellabruxo that let him speak to the earth itself. Moss in the cracks under his boots shivered as if filled with life, swelling rapidly. Thick, emerald vines burst from the ground like awakened pythons, hugging the soil and snaking toward the dragon's nest. The tips of the vines reached deftly for the golden egg, intending to coil around it and carry it away. A beautiful opening move, Ludo Bagman's voice, amplified by charm work, announced to the crowd. Champion Rodriguez has chosen Castellabruxo's famed plant manipulation, attempting a theft from range, a very cautious strategy. A murmur ran through the stands, Castellabruxo students sitting straighter. The Ridgeback, however, was no fool. Its molten gold vertical pupils watched the tiny assailants with icy attention. Just as the vines brushed the egg, the great beast opened its huge maw and erupted, not in a roar, but in a blinding torrent of blue fire. "Merlin! Blue flames! The Norwegian Ridgeback's breath is unbelievably hot!" Bagman cried. Where the flames swept, the emerald vines disintegrated into ash and scattering fragments. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning plants. The residual heat made the rocks around the nest glow faintly red. The Ridgeback did not press the attack. It closed its mouth slowly, a low growl rumbling from deep inside, its dark golden eyes flat with a hint of contempt as they fixed on Diego. Its message was clear. "You won't touch my egg." The attempt at a remote theft had failed. Fine beads of sweat appeared on Diego's brow, not only from tension, but from the heat of that blue fire. It seems the Ridgeback is extremely vigilant. Champion Rodriguez's first probe was easily thwarted. He needs a new plan, Bagman said, disappointed. Diego's wand moved again, his incantation sharper. Tundra plants sprang up in the arena, forming a thick green shield before him. He pointed the wand toward the far side of the nest, and a gnarled, twisted tree erupted from the soil, branches lashing wildly to draw the Ridgeback's attention. "A feint," Bagman guessed. "A classic trick, but this is a dragon." "I'm afraid it still won't work," Sargeras murmured from the professor's box, raising an eyebrow. The Ridgeback tilted its head, glanced at the noisy tree, snorted 2 disdainful puffs, and did not budge. It had seen through the ruse. Diego's face grew serious. He seemed to decide on something decisive. He stopped skirting the beast and began to strike. Repeated flicks sent sharp, enchanted javelins toward the Ridgeback's head, eyes, and the joints of its wings, the relatively vulnerable spots. Most were deflected by its hard scales, exploding into sparks, but the continuous harassment began to sting and finally succeeded in enraging the giant. Rodriguez has changed tactics. He's attacking the dragon directly, aggressive and extremely dangerous. Bagman's voice tightened. The Ridgeback roared, utterly furious. No longer content to guard, it reared up, the shadow of its massive body swallowing much of the arena. Its broad wings unfurled with a hurricane of dust and rubble. "It's going to attack! The Norwegian ridgeback has left its nest!" Bagman shouted. Screams rippled through the audience as the dragon lunged at Diego like a flying mountain, claws glinting, jaws opening, blue fire building in its throat. Diego's face went pale. He threw himself back and to the side, quickly thickening the plant barrier before him. The dragon's claw shredded most of the shield, sending splinters of wood and leaves flying. A tongue of blue flame grazed his back, searing his clothes and lancing pain through his skin. Dangerous. Too dangerous. Bagman's voice trembled. Champion Rodrigues is in critical condition. He's barely holding on under the dragon's assault. For a moment, the contest seemed to spiral out of control. Diego dodged breath and talon, each escape drawing gasps from the stands. No one noticed, however, that the roots of the decoy tree had been crawling like living tentacles beneath the nest. They slid carefully around the real eggs, coiling precisely to encircle the golden prize. As the ridgeback reared once more, preparing to land a killing blow on Diego, Diego mouthed a silent syllable, then tugged with his wand. The roots sprang. The golden egg was wrenched from the bottom of the nest, tearing through the soft earth, tracing a glittering arc, and landing securely in Diego's hand. "The golden egg! He's got it! Merlin's beard! When did he—" Bagman's voice choked with astonishment, then burst into rapturous exclamation. "He's done it! Champion Diego Rodrigues of Castellabruxo, after a thrilling struggle, has seized the golden egg. He exploited the moment when the dragon was enraged and left its nest. Brilliant deception and execution." The arena erupted into thunderous applause. The Castellabruxo section was delirious. Only then did the ridgeback realize it had been tricked. It let out an enraged, unwilling roar. But the arena's enchantments triggered. The simulated nest shimmered and dissolved, the dragon's figure blurring and vanishing into thin air along with the rest of the projection. Diego stood alone in the restored arena, the golden egg clasped tight in his hand. Sweat and dust streaked his face. Burn marks blackened his back. He stood upright, exhausted but proud, a relieved smile breaking across his features. He had passed the first severe test through courage and cunning. Chapter 351, Scoring. What a spectacular performance! Ludo Bagman's voice rang out over the hall, trying to calm the rising cheers. "Let us applaud once more the champion Diego Rodrigues of Castellabruxo. He showed extraordinary courage, precise magical control, and a cool head at the crucial moment." Warm applause erupted again. As it died down, Bagman squared his shoulders and pointed toward the judges' table. "Now, esteemed judges, please score Champion Rodrigues' performance. 10 points is a perfect score." The principals and ministry representatives at the judges' table exchanged glances and raised their glowing scorecards. Professor Dumbledore, smiling gently and approvingly, held up an 8. Madame Maxime nodded and showed an 8. The Thunderbird gave an 8 as well. Most other judges, representatives from Ouagadougou and Kunlun among them, gave scores clustered around 7 and 8, which seemed fair. When Igor Karkaroff's turn came, indifference cut across his face. He slowly raised his card, a glaring 4. A chorus of boos and mutters swept the audience. Castellabruxo's students stood as one, outraged. Karkaroff seemed unmoved. His voice, amplified by magic, carried in a harsh tone. The tactics were too one-sided, overly reliant on plant magic, and lacked direct magical combat capability. Besides, he was clearly injured in the process. His response wasn't perfect, and there were obvious mistakes. Principal Oliveira's expression darkened instantly. He turned to Karkaroff, anger barely contained in his voice. "Karkaroff, your judgment is unfair. My student retrieved the golden egg, and he did it by distracting and outwitting a Norwegian ridgeback. His strategy was clear and effective. Injuries happen in fierce combat. Your score insults his effort and courage." Karkaroff sneered, chin up, his voice laced with contempt. "I'm judging the facts, Principal Oliveira. Perhaps where you are, cunning and bruises earn high marks, but not here. Durmstrang values raw, powerful magic." "Cleverness is wisdom," Oliveira snapped, his beard trembling with anger. "Are you saying my student should have rushed in and grappled the dragon like a barbarian to be considered pure? Your standards are absurd." "Gentlemen, please." Bagman hurried in, forcing a smile. "Every judge has a perspective. That's part of the contest. Let's respect their decisions. Champion Rodriguez's score is still quite respectable. Dumbledore's calm, weighty voice followed. Igor, Alfonso, calm yourselves. The competition continues. Let us focus on the next champion. With Dumbledore's intervention and Bagman's prompting, the dispute subsided, grudgingly. Principal Oliveira snorted and turned back, his face tight. Karkaroff pursed his lips, clearly determined not to lower himself further. Diego Rodriguez's final score for the first task was posted. Karkaroff's low mark had dragged the average down somewhat, but the other judges' fairer scores left Diego with a good result. He left the arena clutching the golden egg to the cheers of Castello Bruxo's students, ready for treatment and rest. All right, a very good result. Thank you, Champion Rodriguez, for giving us such a great start. Bagman's voice crackled with energy. Now, let's keep this going. Please welcome our second champion, from Durmstrang, Hector Ramirez. A burst of rhythmic applause rolled from the Durmstrang section. A tall, broad-shouldered seventh year strode from the side chamber. Hector Ramirez had short, dark hair, a set jaw, keen eyes, and a steady, powerful gait, Durmstrang toughness in every step. He walked to the center and placed his hand on the re-emerging dueling stone tablet. The slab sank again, and the arena shifted. The cold tundra of the Norwegian coast vanished. In its place rose a hot, humid, densely vegetated tropical rainforest. Tall trees towered, vines coiling between trunks, thick canopies almost blotted out the sky. Only a few shafts of sunlight pierced the gloom, dappling the leaf-strewn ground. The air smelled of earth and decay, with a faint, pungent tang. In a relatively open hollow deep in the forest, Hector's opponent lay coiled, a Peruvian viper-tooth. Unlike the heavy, fortress-like Norwegian ridgeback, the Peruvian viper-tooth was lean and streamlined, built for agility in dense undergrowth. Its wings were small, its tail long and flexible. Its bronze scales bore vivid black stripes and a greasy sheen in the dim light. Its head was sharp, and most striking of all were its fangs, pale, chilling, visible even with its mouth closed. Potent, paralyzing venom oozed from those fangs, hissing and wilting plants wherever a drop fell. Wow, a Peruvian viper-tooth. Bagman's commentary filled the arena at the perfect moment. Spectators, this is a very special dragon. Unlike many dragons that rely on fire, this species is famed for deadly fangs and lightning speed. Their venom can quickly paralyze large prey, and they nest deep in jungles, using the complex terrain for ambush. Champion Ramirez must be extremely cautious, watch for surprise attacks, and venom. As if confirming Bagman's words, the viper-tooth gave a snake-like hiss, its bronze vertical pupils flicking in and out of shadow. Its long tail whipped restlessly, snapping ferns at the roots. It didn't sit out in the open like the ridgeback had. Half hidden behind tree roots and hanging vines, it lay low like a seasoned hunter. Hector stood at the forest's edge, wand gripped tight, eyes scanning the tangled surroundings. Unfamiliar with this dragon's particular traits, he did not rush in blindly. So, Bagman continued, what strategy will Hector Ramirez of Durmstrang choose against this speedy, venomous Peruvian viper-tooth? Let us wait and see. Hector Ramirez clearly believed in Durmstrang's practical combat philosophy, strike straight at the vital point. He did not try to outmaneuver or outwit the creature like the previous champion. Instead, he locked onto his target, the dragon's nest tangled in the branches of a towering tree. He raised his wand and without hesitation shouted, "Defindo." Several sharp cutting beams lanced through the thick vines and roots, anchoring the nest to the branches. With a harsh tearing crack, the entire nest toppled. The spotted dragon eggs and the single dazzling golden egg spilled out and thudded onto the soft rainforest floor. It was, without question, the most direct provocation possible. The air filled with a furious, hissing shriek. A streamlined, copper and black shape shot from the root-hidden shadows like a phantom. The Peruvian viper-tooth's speed was astonishing. Before Hector could register the attack, it was already at his former position. Hector rolled to the side and flattened himself against a giant banyan tree. The viper-tooth's claws scraped the trunk, leaving deep furrows as wood chips flew. "Impedimenta!" he cried, springing back out and pointing his wand at the pursuing dragon, trying to slow it. The invisible barrier staggered the viper-tooth, but only for a heartbeat. "Reducto!" Hector followed with a blasting curse that struck the dragon's shoulder. A patch of copper scales burst apart, exposing raw flesh, and the viper tooth roared in pain. A beautiful counterattack. Champion Ramirez demonstrates Durmstrang's solid, dueling foundation. Ludo Bagman shouted into the broadcast. But the viper tooth's ferocity was unleashed. It used the rainforest's maze of trunks and roots like a cunning hunter, dipping behind thick trees, lunging from unexpected angles. It stopped charging head-on and began to use its deadliest weapon, venomous fangs. Slithering around Hector's flank, its long neck darted forward like two poisoned daggers. Hector leapt back. He avoided the bite, but a spray of cloudy venom hit the sleeve of his raised left arm. The fabric sizzled and pitted, and the moment the venom touched his skin, a burning agony flared, followed by a creeping numbness that raced outward. Hector's face went pale. His left arm went heavy and sluggish. Not good! Champion Ramirez has been exposed to the venom. The Peruvian viper-tooth's venom is paralytic. Ludo barked, his voice tight. With his movements hampered, Hector was at a terrible disadvantage. He pressed himself against trunks and dodged, but his counters became slower and less accurate. The numbness was like a corrosive weight, eroding his speed and precision. Biting down on his frustration, Hector jabbed his wand at his own arm and cast a healing charm. Pale light flowed into the injured limb, easing the burning pain somewhat, but it scarcely touched the paralysis seeping into muscle and nerve. His left arm remained unresponsive. Champion Ramirez attempts to heal, but the effect seems minimal, Ludo said. He must continue fighting at a severe disadvantage. A ruthless look crossed Hector's face. Durmstrang did not teach surrender. Dragging his half-numb arm, he kept the trees between himself and the dragon, while firing spells with his right hand to block and repel the viper-tooth's assaults. Reducto! Bombarda! Spells flashed in the humid air. The viper-tooth dodged most nimbly, and those that landed only made it more frantic. Hector gradually shepherded the battle toward where the nest had fallen. The golden egg lay among the rotten leaves, glittering temptingly. The viper-tooth sensed his intent and redoubled its attacks, raking with claws and sweeping with its heavy tail to drive him away. Then, for a heartbeat, an opening appeared. Determination hardened Hector's features. Ignoring the dragon's harassment, he dashed out from behind a tree and lunged for the golden egg at full speed. The viper-tooth's eyes gleamed with cunning. Instead of lunging to bite, it opened its jaws and spewed a ribbon of scorching orange-red flame, cutting off his path. "Danger!" Ludo called, and the stands gasped. Hector flung himself sideways, the flames licking across his back, the heat taking the air from his lungs. He rose unsteady, and a second wave came instantly, this time a high-pressure spray of cloudy, acrid venom aimed at his face. "Protego!" Hector cried, and with his still responsive right hand, conjured a shield that took the venom with a corrosive sizzle. Droplets spattered outward, and he did not hesitate. Pushing off, he darted again like an arrow toward the egg. He could make out the faint patterns on the golden shell, so close. But the viper-tooth had not left its ultimate weapon unused. Its long, whip-like tail had been coiled at the ready. Just as Hector's fingers brushed the egg, a dull, thunderous thud echoed as the tail struck him in the chest. The force launched him off his feet and slammed him against a massive trunk. He crumpled. His wand flew from his grip. Before he could cry out properly, the viper-tooth swept in. It clamped its pale, venom-studded fangs around him and bit down. A brilliant white light detonated from Hector, enveloping him in the dragon's head. When it faded, the viper-tooth hissed triumphantly and stood over the unharmed golden egg. Hector Ramirez himself had vanished. "Oh no!" Ludo's voice broke with shock. "Champion Ramirez, he's been struck! The protective magic has activated. He must withdraw from the competition." Shock rippled through the audience. Durmstrang students stared in disbelief and dismay. Some younger spectators covered their mouths. Ludo hurried to reassure them. "Don't panic. Everyone, please remain calm. The arena's protective mechanism has been triggered. Champion Ramirez is not fatally injured. He is badly hurt, yes, but he will be immediately transported to the infirmary for Madame Pomfrey and the medical staff to treat. Let us wish him a speedy recovery. This, however, shows unequivocally that the dangers in this Triwizard tournament are real." Even with Ludo's assurances, Hector Ramirez's defeat was a sobering warning. Against these magical beasts, courage and strong attack spells were not nearly enough. Chapter 353, Welsh Green Dragon. A very regrettable outcome. Ludo Bagman's voice chimed in at the right moment, trying to liven the atmosphere. But this is the Tri-Wizard tournament, full of unknowns and challenges. Let's once again thank the warrior Ramirez for his courage and wish him a speedy recovery. Oh, is this Durmstrang's champion? Castellabruxo's headmaster, Alfonso Oliveira, said with an unmistakable sneer. His sharp gaze cut to Karkaroff, whose face was rigid. Igor, according to your unique judging standards, it seems your pupil has already demonstrated the kind of pure strength you prize. No need for wisdom or strategy. How enlightening. Oliveira deliberately emphasized pure, trickery, wisdom, and strategy, echoing Karkaroff's earlier derision of Diego Rodriguez. Karkaroff's expression darkened. Through gritted teeth he managed, Durmstrang's instruction is beyond reproach, Oliveira. Even in defeat, my pupil is an honorable fighter, unlike those who rely on petty tricks. Petty tricks? Any trick that wins you the golden egg and passes the test is a good trick. Oliveira shrugged, utterly unconcerned by the other's fury. Their sharp exchange, carried by magic across the arena, drew a low ripple of laughter and comment from the crowd. Karkaroff's chest heaved, but bound by the occasion he could only snort, turn away, and fix his gloomy eyes on Victor Krum in the small dark room, placing all hope and pressure on his school's last remaining champion. Bagmen jumped in with forced cheer. Haha, it seems our judges have their own passionate views on magical principles. He hurried to steer attention back to the competition. Now, the contest must continue. Let's welcome our next champion. He drew the suspense out, sweeping his gaze toward the champion's waiting area. Fleur Delacour from Beaubaton. Applause erupted as Fleur Delacour stepped into the light. Her silvery hair fell like a waterfall, her deep blue eyes bright with nerves but steadied by determination. Unlike the previous champions, she did not rush to the stone monument. She walked toward the dueling stone with slow, light steps. The arena shifted. The icy tundra and humid rainforest vanished, giving way to gently rolling hills dotted with low shrubs and gravel. The air smelled of grass and earth. Somewhere a stream murmured. This setting felt far gentler than the previous two. On a mild slope, a Welsh green dragon lay coiled in a simple nest. It was medium-sized by dragon standards, its scales a pleasing emerald that blended with the hillside, making it almost beautiful. Orange pupils glinted with alertness, and occasional sparks from its nostrils were a reminder that it was hardly harmless. Welsh green dragons are known for a relatively gentle temperament, only by dragon standards. They usually attack only when provoked, but their fire is deadly, and their roar carries a stunning, terrifying force. A Welsh green dragon, Bagman narrated. It looks a bit friendlier than the previous opponents, but don't be fooled. Miss Delacour must beware its flames and that glass-shattering roar. Fleur had clearly prepared thoroughly. She neither provoked the dragon like Hector, nor tried to control it from afar, like Diego. She watched the green dragon and the conspicuous golden egg nestled beneath it, then slowly raised her wand. Rather than casting an aggressive spell, she began to sing a melodious incantation. A silvery glow, as soft as moonlight, flowed from her wand tip. It wasn't dazzling, but it carried a soothing power that rippled toward the Welsh green like water. This was a refined, calming charm, one of the arts Beaubatons excelled at. The dragon's raised head relaxed under the silver light. The fierce gleam in its orange eyes dimmed, replaced by confusion and drowsiness. Its massive head drooped. The growls from its throat softened into a purring, almost like snoring. Merlin, incredible! Bagman lowered his voice in awe, though no outside sound would reach the arena. Miss Delacour is using a sophisticated sleeping charm. She's trying to put the dragon to sleep. What a clever strategy! The crowd held its breath as Fleur maintained the spell and crept toward the nest. The silver glow wrapped the dragon. Its eyelids grew heavy. Fleur was only a few steps from the egg when disaster struck. Looking straight ahead, she stumbled on a sharp piece of gravel. The silvery light from her wand wavered, faltering. At that moment, the green dragon shook its head. The confusion retreated from its eyes, replaced by sudden, furious awareness. It let out a deafening roar that sent a dizzying wave through Fleur. Her movements faltered. "Oh no!" Bagman blurted. The startled dragon opened its mouth and spat a searing jet of flame toward Fleur. She reacted instantly. She broke the sleeping charm, floated backward as if under a levitation charm, and at the same time flicked her wand. Aguamenti! A thick column of water shot from her wand and collided with the dragon's fire. Steam hissed up in a blinding cloud. For a moment, the dragon's vision was obscured, but its fury only intensified. It stamped and charged, pursuing Fleur. Fleur used nimble footwork and Bobaton's training to weave through the rocks and heather, dodging the dragon's leaps and intermittent flames. She hurled occasional jinxes, obstacle curses, and a few stupefy bolts to slow it, but with limited effect. The struggle turned into a stalemate. She couldn't easily reach the nest, and the dragon couldn't catch her quicksilver movements. The situation's become tricky. The sleeping plan's been interrupted, and Miss Delacour's caught in a struggle, Bagman narrated. She has to find another solution. Fast. After a narrow dodge, Fleur's eyes locked once more on the golden egg and then on the relentlessly closing dragon. Deciding quickly, she began to chant another spell while she kept moving. Her wand wasn't aimed at the beast, but at a scatter of pebbles near the nest. Under her magic, the stones levitated and, as if pinched together by an invisible hand, coalesced into a crude imitation of the golden egg, glimmering faintly with a simulated glow. With a flick, she flung the fake egg far from the nest. The Welsh Green's attention snapped to the glittering decoy. Anxious and territorial, it hissed and surged toward the false treasure to reclaim it. Fleur seized the opening. She sprinted to the nest and snatched up the real golden egg. She did it! She has it! Bagman shouted with excitement. Feinting, a classic tactic. Miss Delacour used a fake egg to distract the nursing dragon and seized the real one. How ingenious, how elegant. Fleur Delacour of Beaubaton has passed the challenge. The protective enchantment triggered. The Welsh Green and the simulated hillside dissolved. Fleur stood in the center of the arena, breathless, her silver hair a little tousled and her cheeks flushed, but the golden egg was clutched in her hands and a victorious smile lit her face. She gave an elegant bow toward the Beaubaton section, which erupted in cheers and applause. Madame Maxime looked relieved. The judges tallied their scores. Dumbledore and several other heads gave high marks, 8s and 9s, recognizing her cleverness and strategy. Karkaroff, pouting as if searching for fault, finally raised a score under everyone's gaze. Given how nearly flawless her performance had been, he grudgingly held up a 6. Low, but more civil than the 4 he'd given Rodrigues. Fleur's overall score was strong. She walked off the stage with the golden egg to sustained applause. Thank you, Miss Delacour, for that wonderful performance, a true blend of wisdom and beauty. Ludo Bagman called exuberantly as Fleur stepped away. He raised his voice again. And now the next champion ready to face the challenge is, from Ilvermorny, Spud Kowalski. A figure wrapped in the Thunderbird House banner emerged from the small dark room. Tall and handsome, with a head of golden curls, Spud Kowalski walked toward the dueling monument with a confident smile. He pressed his palm to the stone. The runes flared, then faded. The arena shifted. The damp hills vanished and were replaced by a jagged mountain range of strange crags studded with colored crystals. The air felt thin and dry, the simulated sky a perfect azure, and harsh sunlight struck the gems, scattering brilliant refractions. It was a barren, gem-rich ridge. At its highest point, in a magnificent nest of crystal and gleaming metal, lounged Spud's opponent, an opal-eyed dragon. Noble in bearing, its sleek body was sheathed in mother-of-pearl scales that threw off a halo of rainbow light under the sun. Its eyes were not pupils, but 2 enormous opal spheres, shimmering with shifting colors. Its wings, far larger than its frame, were like translucent canvases filigreed with gold and silver. Unlike many dragons, this one seemed more interested in the glittering treasure in its nest and the golden egg than in attacking intruders. "Oh, a rare opal-eyed dragon," Bagman crowed. "Spectators, behold, what a stunning creature. One of the least combative of the dragons, it usually fights only to protect its nest. Its flames are a vivid red and quite powerful, but it prefers remote places. Champion Kowalski's luck seems to be in his favor." Spud did not look pleased. He watched the leisurely dragon, which was idly nudging a gem, glanced up at the clear sky simulation, then did something that surprised everyone. Instead of creeping closer, he backed away a few paces to a more open, safer position. He lifted his wand and began to chant an old-sounding incantation in a deep, sustained voice. Bagman's tone turned curious. Champion Kowalski appears to be preparing a very powerful spell. This prelude, perhaps weather magic. A ripple of whispers ran through the stands. Only the Thunderbird students recognized the chant and nodded to one another. Bagman used the pause to fill the audience in. While Champion Kowalski prepares his spell, I should explain why there are 9 dragons. The committee had planned 7 dragons, one for each champion from the 7 schools, but with changes in participants, there weren't enough. Hogwarts kindly provided 2 extra dragons. This opali is one of them. Around Spud, the magical air thickened as his incantation reached its climax. The clear sky darkened with alarming speed. Heavy clouds gathered, low and roiling, thunder growling from within, little flashes of electric light slithering through the gloom. The opali, sensing the change, stopped playing with its gems and lifted its graceful head. Its opal eyes tracked the sky warily. It gave a sharp, warning roar. Spud's spell finished. A blinding white light burst from his wand, aimed squarely upward, and his final words rang out like thunder. Thunder from the heavens! A pale bolt, so bright it seemed to bleach the colors from the floating arena, tore through the roiling clouds. It fell like a divine sword, carrying the weight of heaven and earth, and struck straight into the opali's nest. Boom! A deafening crash smothered everything. For a dizzy heartbeat, the light was unbearable. When the glare and roar subsided, the spectators stared in stunned silence. The elegant opali and its elaborate nest had vanished. All that remained was a scorched circle and quivering arcs of residual electricity. The nest's protective enchantments had been pushed to their limit. The dragon, having taken what the magic deemed a lethal blow, had been teleported out of the arena. Miraculously, the golden egg lay unbroken amid the burnt earth, somehow made more brilliant by the destruction around it. Spud lowered his wand, pale from exertion. He strode forward and calmly picked up the egg. The crowd was stunned into silence. The demonstration of raw, overwhelming power had left them breathless. After a few seconds, Bagman's voice broke through, high with excitement. Merlin's beard, my goodness, 1 bolt, Champion Kowalski. He summoned lightning and ended the match outright. Unbelievable. The Ilvermorny champion has shown us absolute power. That's the most dramatic moment of this competition yet. Applause and cheers swelled, delayed but fierce. The Ilvermorny contingent leapt to its feet. The judges began to score. Dumbledore paused, then awarded an 8. Most other heads of school also gave high marks, acknowledging the sheer potency of Kowalski's magic. When it came to Karkaroff, his face tightened and he reluctantly presented a 5, muttering, lacks finesse, pure brute force. But Karkaroff's low mark felt small and impotent against the spectacle everyone had just witnessed. Chapter 355, Sect's Secret Skills. Sargeras sat in the professor's box. When the bolt of lightning tore through the sky, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Thunder from the sky, he murmured, a faint smile touching his lips. The Thunderbird House's signature spell, indeed. He glanced toward the Ilvermorny champion, who was still receiving cheers in the arena, memories drifting back to the year he'd spent teaching at Ilvermorny a few years earlier. He had lived with the school long enough to know its house culture and old magics intimately. Each of Ilvermorny's 4 houses had its own specialty. Thunderbird harnessed storms and thunder and prized daring. Their pinnacle spell, famously, was this awe-inspiring thunder from the sky. Horned Serpent prized wisdom and insight, specializing in healing and mind magic. Their signature was a restorative spell known as Life's Blessing, which could stimulate life force and mend grievous wounds in a short time. Pukwudgie represented resilience and craftsmanship tied to the earth. They excelled at communicating with ley lines and terrain. Their celebrated magic, Earth's Binding, could reshape the land within a range, raise barriers, or animate stone, both offense and defense, as stable as a mountain. Wampus embodied warrior courage and focused intuition. Their hallmark was an acceleration spell called Swift Shadow Assault, not apparition, but an extreme burst of speed that, if paired with an unbreakable penetration charm, would terrify any duelist. These ancient magics were peaks in Ilvermorny's system, and the conditions to learn them were brutal. Only genuine prodigies could master them. That Spud Kowalski could unleash thunder from the sky, even in its embryonic form, proved him worthy of Thunderbird's champion title. Sargeras reined in his wandering thoughts and turned his attention back to the arena. Spud's astonishing display had pushed the match to a new high. The crowd buzzed. People still drank in the aftershock of that cracking lightning while their curiosity and awe for Ilvermorny grew. Sargeras had spent a long time studying those 4 signature spells. He had even become the 3rd wizard in history to master all of them. Still, he knew their limits. Thunder from the sky was spectacular, undeniably a house-defining ultimate, but beyond dramatic, preset attacks like today, it had little use in a real duel. Its long wind-up and the need for precise aiming were fatal weaknesses against a mobile opponent. Ludo Bagman's voice brought everyone back to the present. The competition so far has been a string of climaxes, with each champion bringing us surprises. So next, he drew out the moment, casting his eyes toward the champion's waiting area with a theatrical mix of encouragement and contrived concern. Let's welcome our next champion, the pride of Hogwarts, and the youngest participant in this Triwizard tournament, Harry Potter. The reaction in the stands was complicated. Gryffindor erupted in the loudest cheers, and other houses offered polite applause, but under it all were whispers of doubt and sympathetic looks. 14-year-old Harry Potter still looked boyish among the older champions. He took a slow, steadying breath, feeling his heart hammer in his chest. He forced himself forward from the small, dim waiting room and walked toward the center of the arena. Thousands of eyes fell on him, some expectant, some worried, many skeptical. He laid his hand on the newly risen dueling stone. The monument sank, and the scene shifted. A blistering heat wave rolled over him, carrying the acrid scents of sulfur and char. The arena had become a desolate volcanic plain. The ground was dark, pitted rock, steam hissed from fissures, and the stunted, spiky black shrubs were the only vegetation. In the center, built of raw stone, lay a massive nest, and in it, a creature that made the crowd draw breath in unison. A Hungarian horntail. It was the most dangerous, most aggressive of dragons. Its black scales were as thick as armor plates, gleaming cold and metallic under the simulated red sky. Brass-colored spikes ran down its back from head to the barbed tip of its tail. Its folded wings looked tougher than bat membranes. Most terrifying were its eyes, vertical yellow slits like pools of burning sulfur fixed on Harry. From its nostrils came not mist but black smoke laced with glowing embers, and a low, threatening rumble rolled through its chest. "Merlin's fattest boxer shorts," Ludo blurted, his voice straining with tension, as if he had forgotten the need for decorum. "It's a Hungarian horntail, the fiercest, most dangerous species of dragon. Look at those armor-like scales and deadly spikes. Its fire has the greatest range and tremendous power, and it's ill-tempered and extremely aggressive." He let the warning hang in the suddenly hushed arena, his concern carried by magic. "And our Harry Potter is the youngest of the champions. This is an unlucky draw. Harry, my boy, you need a miracle." Murmurs of fear and sympathy rippled through the stands. Hermione pressed her hand to her mouth. Ron's face had gone as white as parchment. Even Professor McGonagall in the professor's box clenched her jaw, knuckles whitening. The horntail seemed truly enraged by the noise and the tiny figure before it. It reared its head and let out a deafening roar that shook loose pebbles from the nest. Its heavy tail smashed against the rock, carving out a shallow pit and sending stones flying. It coiled protectively around a clutch of eggs. Among the black dragon eggs lay one golden egg, shining with an almost irresistible glow. Then the beast's burning gaze fixed on Harry. It lowered its massive bulk into an attack stance, as if daring the small boy to come closer. "Come over here. Let me crush you." Harry stood on the scorching plain, feeling as insignificant as a mote of dust. Facing a nightmare made flesh, his wand hand slick with cold sweat, but along with fear there burned a stubborn flame in his green eyes, a refusal to give up. 356, Hungarian Horntail. Facing the mountain of muscle and the searing breath of the Hungarian Horntail, Harry's heart hammered in his chest. His green eyes fixed on the agitated beast, he raised his wand slowly. "Stupefy." A jet of red light lashed toward the horntail's head, but the spell only seemed to enrage the monster more. Harry Potter didn't hesitate, Ludo Bagman shouted. He actually chose to attack the Hungarian horntail directly. The spell hit the dragon's head, but it's clearly unharmed. Enraged by the blast, the horntail spread its wings and lunged out of its nest. It landed in front of Harry, and instead of breathing fire immediately, swung its massive brass-spiked tail at his waist like a giant mace. The wind from the swing whistled through the air, too fast. A collective scream rose from the stands. At that moment, the last trace of fear left Harry's face. He didn't try a shield charm. That would have been useless. Acting on pure animal instinct, he dove forward and to the side. Boom! The tail smashed into the spot where he'd just been, shattering the hard volcanic rock. Sharp fragments scored his cheek and arm. They burned, but he had dodged the fatal blow. He rolled and slid behind a large outcrop. Almost the instant he was hidden, a torrent of flame engulfed the other side of the rock. The stone glowed red, and the heat singed Harry's back. Potter used the rock as cover to dodge the horntail's flames, Bagman shouted. A brilliant dodge, amazing reaction speed. But the horntail's assault didn't end. It stalked around the rock, its yellow, vertical pupils locking on Harry. Its fanged maw opened, and a crimson glow flared deep in its throat. Harry knew he couldn't stay hidden. He leaned out, wand aimed at the glowing throat, the most vulnerable spot, and shouted, "Impedimenta!" The spell struck the horntail's throat, cutting off the blast that was about to erupt. The dragon snapped its jaws shut with a cough of black smoke, misfiring, then shook its head in anger. Taking advantage of the opening, Harry moved like a sure-footed goat, running and leaping over the jagged volcanic terrain. He didn't run straight. He used rocks of every size as cover, changing direction constantly to make the dragon's aim unreliable. The horntail grew more furious. It roared and lashed out flames that cracked and burned the rocks Harry had passed. Its claws and tail smashed everything in its path. Rock shards and sparks flew. More than once, the searing breath came close enough to singe the hem of his robes. Sweat poured down his forehead, breath ragged, but his eyes sharpened. "Impedimenta!" he cried again, weaving between boulders and firing jinxes at the horntail's ankles. The spells didn't stop the beast, but they made it stumble, buying him precious seconds. Defindo. He aimed for its eyes. The charm couldn't pierce the thick scales, but the constant harassment only made the dragon wilder. Sometimes Harry crouched and slid under the sweep of the tail. Sometimes he vaulted off a sloping rock to clear a wave of flame. Every move looked perilous, but he escaped by inches each time. "My word! He's doing it! Harry's keeping up with the Hungarian horntail." Bagman's voice trembled with excitement. "Look at his movement. Look at his timing. This is no 14-year-old. At last, after using an exploding charm to shatter a giant boulder behind the horntail and distract it, Harry saw his chance. Like a released colt, he threw off fear and anything that slowed him. One aim drove him, the golden egg. He lowered his body and sprinted toward the nest. The horntail realized what he meant and wheeled with a roar, spewing a searing wall of flame to block his path. Harry didn't flinch. Under the crowd's stunned gaze, he did something reckless. He didn't slow. He sped up. At the last possible moment before the flames hit, he dove forward in a ground slide, slipping through a gap under the blast no more than half a meter high. He flashed through. But one danger was followed by another. The dragon's spiked tail, a crushing, air-tearing club, swept in right behind the flames. Its arc covered almost every escape route. There was nowhere to go. In that split second, Harry made a desperate choice. He turned, held his wand horizontal in front of him, and threw up a spell with everything he had. Protego, a translucent shield, snapped into being. The tail struck it with bone-shuddering force. Boom, and the barrier shattered like glass, but not before it absorbed most of the blow. Harry felt as if a locomotive had hit him. His body flew off his feet and was violently hurled backward. "No!" Hermione and Ron cried together from the stands. Harry didn't panic. The direction he flew was straight toward the dragon's nest. Using the momentum of the horntail's strike, he became a human cannonball aimed at his prize. Through the pain, every internal organ jolting, his stomach churning, he steadied his wand hand and intoned, "Arresto momentum." The out-of-control cannonball arced, then changed to a controlled fall. Harry landed upright inside the horntail's nest, his fingertips brushing the cold, hard shell of the golden egg. He grabbed it, clutched it to his chest, rolled to break the impact, and came up on one knee on the other side of the nest. He had done it. A stunned silence held the arena for a heartbeat, Then the stands exploded. Cheers rolled like a tidal wave. Gryffindor red almost flooded the galleries. The Hungarian horntail roared in fury, but protective magic had triggered, and the dragon's form began to blur and vanish. Harry knelt on the blackened rock, gasping, robes torn, face scratched and smudged with dust, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. He held the golden egg tight, raised his head, and looked out at the roar of the crowd. He did it! Harry Potter did it! Bagman's voice was hoarse with excitement. Brilliant tactics, unparalleled courage. He used the dragon's own attack to carry him to victory. Let's give the warmest applause to Hogwarts' champion, Harry Potter. Chapter 356, Chinese Fireball Dragon. The deafening cheers still echoed around the arena. Harry clutched the golden egg, exhausted from the escape, yet elated by victory. He stood on the central platform, breathing shallowly, waiting for the final judgment. Absolutely brilliant, an unparalleled performance. Ludo Bagman's voice trembled with excitement. Now, let our judges score Harry Potter's courageous performance. The principals and representatives at the judges' table began to reveal their scores. Professor Dumbledore, his face showing undisguised satisfaction, held up his placard, 9 points, one of the highest marks given so far. Madame Maxime inclined her head gracefully and gave 7 points. The Ilvermorny representative showed 8. Most of the other judges, Ouagadou, Castellabruxo, Kunlun, and others, generally gave 7s or 8s. The Hogwarts students watched the tally climb, faces bright with pride as the applause swelled. When it came to Igor Karkaroff, his expression remained sullen and indifferent. He didn't spare Harry a glance, and in a deliberate cold motion he raised his placard, 3 points. What? The Hogwarts stands erupted. How dare he? Not again! The roar of outrage nearly drowned out everything else. Gryffindors went crimson with fury, leaping to their feet and shouting at the judges' table. Even usually mild Hufflepuffs and the Ravenclaws looked affronted. Silence! Please maintain order. Bagman tried to calm the crowd, but his voice was lost in the booze. Karkaroff, unmoved by the commotion, announced his reason in a clipped, flat tone. Various spells used hastily, awkward posture, completely lacking the demeanor a champion should possess. The nitpicking only inflamed the crowd more. Nonsense! Are you blind, Karkaroff? Poor loser! The Weasley twins even made a move for an ill-timed filibuster firework display before Professor McGonagall's stern look stopped them in their tracks. A confrontation seemed likely, but under Dumbledore's quiet gaze and the prefect's efforts, the uproar was forced down into mutters and furious glares. In the end, despite Karkaroff's malicious low score, the other judges' high marks kept Harry's total respectable. Holding the egg, he saw Ron and Hermione waving wildly and beaming, and the sting of Karkaroff's slight faded. He'd done it. That was what mattered. All right, a small interlude. Bagman wiped non-existent sweat from his brow and quickly moved on. Let's continue the tournament. Next up, from Durmstrang, Victor Krum. A low, measured cheer rose from the Durmstrang contingent. Victor Krum, with his usual grim, sullen expression, strode forward. As a world-class Quidditch star, all eyes turned to him. The earlier outrage at Karkaroff was momentarily diverted as the crowd wondered how Durmstrang's champion would fare. Krum walked to the center of the platform. He placed his broad palm on the cold, dueling stone. Runes spiraled, light flickered, and the tablet sank. The arena transformed. The scorched volcanic landscape vanished, replaced by a lush bamboo grove. Slender stalks shot upward and leaves whispered in the simulated breeze. The air was damp and fresh, carrying the green scent of leaves and earth. Deep within the bamboo, the ground rose into a circular clearing paved with smooth pebbles and soft moss. At its center sat a dragon's nest, and perched there was Krum's opponent, a Chinese fireball dragon. This dragon looked different from the earlier beasts. Its body was lithe and long, its scales polished like red lacquer that flashed scarlet against the green. A circlet of golden spikes crowned its head. Its snout was short, and the scales around its nostrils were a special gold. Most striking were its eyes, emerald green, cat-like pupils fixed on the intruder. "Oh, it's a Chinese fireball dragon!" Bagman's voice trilled at the right moment. "Spectators, this is a very distinctive and intelligent dragon. Look at those scarlet scales and the golden crown on its head. Its name comes from its signature attack." As if to illustrate, the Chinese fireball dragon tilted its head back. The golden scales around its nostrils seemed to glow. With a fierce roar it spat. Not a continuous blast, but a single, molten glowing fireball, hot and dazzling, as large as a broomstick's head. It whistled toward Crumb, striking the ground a short distance in front of him with a thunderous boom, leaving a shallow, charred pit. Sparks scattered and ignited a few bamboo leaves, filling the air with the smell of scorched plant. See that? An explosive fireball. Extremely long range, very high accuracy. Bagman rattled off. Although not the largest breed, its agility and intelligence more than make up for that. They're said to understand human commands to a degree, which makes them one of the easier dragons to train. Of course, easier to train doesn't mean this one will go easy on champion Crumb. This is a formidable opponent. After the warning blast, the Chinese fireball dragon did not launch a continuous assault. It watched, measuring Crumb and the arena with that keen, cat-like gaze. Victor Krum stood at the edge of the bamboo grove and raised his wand with absolute certainty. Reducto! A brilliant jet of light, like a bullet, shot toward the Chinese fireball dragon's scarlet-scaled shoulder. The spell struck, showering sparks across the armor-like hide. It didn't pierce the scales, but the impact brought a sharp, pained hiss from the beast. That was only the opening move. Krum shifted his position to avoid becoming a stationary target for fire, keeping his wand moving without pause. Defindo! Bombarda! Impedimenta! A storm of spell light, gray, blue, and gold, cut through the air, aimed with uncanny precision at the dragon's head, eyes, and wing joints. Crumb's casting was blisteringly fast and ruthlessly exact. Each curse had a purpose, to enrage, to harry, to force the dragon away from its nest. My goodness, Champion Crumb has chosen a frontal assault. Ludo Bagman's voice crackled across the arena, the commentator thrilled by the spectacle. Amazing speed, terrifying accuracy. It seems Crumb's not only a star on the Quidditch pitch, he's a formidable duelist. The Chinese fireball dragon, provoked by the relentless onslaught, thrashed and spat fire, anger blazing in its emerald eyes. Distance no longer satisfied it. With a terrible hiss that became a roar, it reared up from its pebble nest, powerful hind limbs bracing, and lunged at the nimble figure who had dared to molest its clutch. "It's out! Crumb has lured the dragon from its nest," Bagman shouted. Exactly what Crumb had intended. He sidestepped the swiping claw with cat-like reflexes, while his wand never faltered. Two thin gray beams shot like serpents, aimed squarely at the dragon's eyes. Ow! The beast emitted the most agonized screech yet heard that day. It thrashed, its massive bulk convulsing as blinding pain racked it. With both eyes struck by the blinding jinx, it collapsed, toppling into the bamboo and crushing a swath of green under its weight. It writhed and roared on the ground, helpless and furious. Crumb seized the moment. He didn't spare a glance toward the creature. He moved like black lightning straight for the nest. In a few swift bounds he was over the clutch, scooped the heavy golden egg free from among the dark, red-speckled dragon eggs, and cradled it to his chest. The action was seamless, practiced, efficient. Only then did the nest's protective magic trigger. The dragon, still flailing in pain, and the bamboo grove around them began to blur and vanish. When the spell cleared, Crumb stood alone at the center of the arena, expression unreadable, the golden egg secure in his arms. He had executed a direct, decisive plan and succeeded. He did it! Victor Crumb! He did it! Bagman's voice reverberated as the Durmstrang section erupted in cheers, relief washing away the earlier gloom over their first champion's stumble. A clean, decisive frontal assault, unparalleled precision, that cruel, clever, blinding jinx. He lured the dragon out and blinded it, then took the egg, simple and direct. This is the work of a true world-class star. Bagman continued, almost breathless. Karkaroff could barely contain himself. He shot to his feet and flung up a scoreboard with theatrical pride, a glittering, perfect 10. Impeccable, precise, powerful, composed, the pride of Durmstrang, he proclaimed. Many in the stands frowned at the obvious partiality. Professor Dumbledore calmly raised an 8, fair, measured. Madame Maxime gave 7. Ilvermorny's delegate marked 7 as well. The other principals, including representatives from Ouagadougou and Kunlun Magic School, mostly awarded 7s and 8s. Crumb's performance had been excellent. Those scores reflected that. But 2 principals gave notably lower marks. Principal Oliveira of Castellabruxo sniffed and slowly lifted a 4. Under Karkaroff's furious glare, he said, deliberately measured, too aggressive, lacks respect and compassion for magical creatures. Blinding them as an objective, those means are not honorable. It is little different from opportunism. Only the tools differ. His words echoed Karkaroff's earlier barbs about another champion, and they were not aimed to flatter. Even worse for Karkaroff, the veiled Uagado principal raised only a 3, her face impassive as she stated, Uagado does not endorse methods that achieve goals purely through harming another being. You, Karkaroff sputtered, blood rising to his face. He jabbed a finger at Oliveira and the Uagado principal. This is prejudice. Crumb's performance was far superior to champions who resort to petty tricks. Oliveira waved the accusation aside. Igor, judging is every judge's right. Just as you exercise yours, so do we ours, he said coolly. The Uagado principal met Karkaroff with a single icy glance and otherwise remained silent. Ludo Bagman hurried in, the practiced peacemaker. Differences in scoring are normal, he said. This is precisely what our tournament aims for, embracing different magical philosophies. Let us respect each judge's decision. Dumbledore's voice then cut in gently but firmly. Igor, please sit down. The contest is not over. Let us not allow personal temper to disturb the fairness and harmony of the event. Under the weight of Dumbledore's gaze and the audience's attention, Karkaroff subsided back into his chair, cheeks flushed and expression sour. He shot venomous looks at the principals who had docked Crumb's score, especially Oliveira, but he said nothing more. Karkaroff's perfect 10 was balanced out by the lower marks. Crumb's final tally remained high, but not the crushing lead Karkaroff had hoped to manufacture. Sagres watched with some amusement. It was, he thought, foolish arrogance. If Karkaroff wished to bully the scoring, he should have picked an easier target than the vindictive Oliveira. Crumb, however, seemed unconcerned. Cradling the golden egg, he cast a quick glance toward the Gryffindor stands, then walked off stage to the cheers of Durmstrang students. The squabble at the judges' table mattered little to him. His task was done. All right, let's continue, Bagman announced briskly. The next champion is ready. From Kunlun Magic School, Jing Shu, Quiet Snow, Chapter 359, The Black Dragon of the Hebdiri Islands. Amid the anticipated applause, a tall, slender young woman stepped out of a small, dark room. She wore a simple black robe embroidered with subtle silver patterns on the cuffs and lapels, runes, ancient and understated. Her black hair was drawn into a neat bun, revealing a smooth forehead and a long, graceful neck. Her face carried a composure and ease beyond her years, a faint smile hovering at the corners of her mouth. She walked steadily to the dueling monument and laid her hand upon it. The scene changed. A blast of cold, biting air, salted with sea breeze, swept across the arena. The floor fell away and the chamber became a desolate black coastline. Jagged black rocks jutted everywhere, and the dark green sea boiled under a low, leaden sky that nearly kissed the horizon. Behind the tallest outcrop, in a crude nest of driftwood, bones, and stone, Jing Shui's opponent crouched, a Hebdiri Islands dragon. It was among the largest of its kind, scales as dark as the rocks around it. Its head was enormous, mouth framed by backward curving horns, a thick snout, and yellow eyes that burned like distant will-o'-the-wisps, brutal and ancient. Huge wings flared at its shoulders, a barbed spike crowned its arrow-shaped tail, and when it breathed, the flame was not merely orange-red but laced with a black corrosive smoke that could eat through stone and metal. It's a Hebdiri Islands dragon, one of the largest and most ferocious, Ludo Bagman announced, voice thick with awe. They live on remote islands and breathe fire mixed with deadly toxin. Look at those rock-like scales. Warrior Jing Shui is facing a mountain that breathes fire and poison. A low gasp rippled through the crowd. The dragon's presence was oppressive, so vast it felt prehistoric. Even Professor Sagres, normally indifferent in the professors section, leaned forward. A flicker of curiosity lit his eyes. The student from Kunlun, he murmured, fingertips on his chin. Facing a dragon, how will she reply? Jing Shui's expression was calm but serious as she faced the behemoth, the air around her smelling of sulfur and salt. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled, and centered herself. The dragon, clearly impatient with this small, unyielding creature, let out a low growl and rasped its claws across the black stone, gouging deep furrows. To everyone's surprise, Jing Shui made a small, unexpected gesture. With a flick of her wrist, the wand in her hand softened and shifted, folding into an intricate bracelet carved with runes and fitting snugly around her wrist. Then she moved, not like a typical dueler fixed in place, but with a fluid rhythm that married physical combat to magic. She dropped her weight, bent her knees, cupped her hands before her. Pale blue motes gathered at her fingertips, as if an invisible current flowed beneath her skin. The Hebdiri dragon obeyed the duel's ritual and waited until she assumed her stance. Then it exploded forward, a claw the size of a boulder slamming down toward her. Jingshui did not meet it head-on. As the claw descended, she twisted her hips, pushed off the dragon's wing, and rolled, light as a cat, evading the crushing blow. At the same time, she thrust her cupped hands forward. A condensed, translucent impact, like an invisible giant hammer, struck the dragon's skull with a low sonic boom. The beast's momentum stuttered. It roared, surprised and furious at such force from a human-sized opponent. "Merlin," Ludo Bagman cried, incredulous. "She didn't use a wand. Is that a blend of martial technique and magic? I've never seen anything like it." Jingshui didn't pause. She darted and leapt among the black rocks with feline agility, sometimes skimming low like a darting fish, sometimes springing upward from a stone ledge. Instead of casting spells at range, she channeled magic through her limbs, each strike and dodge carrying a faint glow. Her speed and suppleness outmatched ordinary fighters. The dragon responded with venomous flame, slashing claws and crushing bulk, shattering rock and filling the air with toxic smoke. Yet Jingshui slipped between its strikes like a shadow, using the sweep of its tail to vault to higher ground. After dodging a blast of black, corrosive fire that skimmed the ground, she saw a momentary weakness. The dragon's attack left it slightly stiff. She stomped down. The runes on her bracelet flared. Pale blue power swirled into her right fist, compressing until it hummed. With a short, powerful straight punch, she drove the charged fist into the dragon's raised neck. The magic detonated on contact, an internal boom that made the beast cry out in pain. Several scales cracked, its massive bulk trembled, and it stumbled back, a look of stunned disbelief in its yellow eyes. "She repelled the dragon with her bare fist?" Bagman shouted. Using the recoil, Jingshui flipped backward, gasping for breath, sweat beading on her forehead. She recovered her stance, magic once again coiling around her hands, ready. Professor Sargeras frowned, thinking aloud. Using oneself as a vessel for magic, guiding it through the body, focusing on flow rather than fixed spell forms, Kunlun's methodology is distinct. The fight settled into a sharp contest. Each magic-infused strike Jingshui landed left the dragon roaring and reeling. Small cracks spidered along its scales, but the beast's armor remained like a fortress. Her blows were like waves against an immovable cliff. They troubled the surface, but could not topple the whole. At the same time, every dodge and attack drained her stamina and mana. She could not afford mistakes. "This isn't good. Her attacks are precise, but they aren't decisive, and she's tiring." Bagman fretted. The dragon smelled blood. Cunning took hold in its eyes. Rather than rushing, it used its bulk and constant venomous breath to weave a lethal net, herding Jingshui into tighter, more confined space. After slipping aside from a sweep of low, corrosive flame, Jingshui straightened. She gathered her remaining magic into her palms with unusual speed. The pale blue light swelled, compressing like a coiled storm. "What is she going to do? Another new spell?" Bagman asked in a tense voice. The dragon, sensing a growing threat, reared and began to condense its own breath, preparing to unleash annihilation. Its maw opened, and a jet of toxic flame began to form when Jingshui finished her charge and thrust her hands forward. A ball of blue energy, the size of a hand, tore through the air toward the dragon's head. The dragon did not flinch. Instead, it lifted its chin, taking the hit with the hardest part of its skull, planning to incinerate the attacker with the resulting heat. But the blue orb did not explode on impact. It burst silently in front of the dragon and blossomed into blinding white light, the brightness of a tiny sun. It ripped at the dragon's eyes, a close-range lumos so intense it devoured vision. The beast howled in rage and pain, its dim light sight utterly pierced by the brilliance. It thrashed, buffeted by the blindness, and its condensed, dragon's breath fell apart in a ragged, uncontrolled rumble. Jingshui did not wait to see the result. She sprinted. Suppressing fatigue and a near-empty mana reserve, she raced toward the dragon's nest. Spectators fell silent as she crossed the broken ground, bent down, and wrapped both arms around a heavy golden egg. The protective wards triggered only then. The Hebdiri dragon, still thrashing and blinded, and the black coastline illusion dissolved, and Jingshe found herself alone again in the center of the arena, clutching the golden egg, her face pale, breath ragged, sweat soaking her temples. A beat of stunned silence, and then the arena erupted in cheers. "She did it! Warrior Jingshui did it!" Bagman's voice cracked with excitement. A masterful tactical deception, using an apparent offensive as a feint when the core was the simplest spell, Lumos. She exploited the dragon's arrogance. Even nearly spent, she remained calm and clever enough to seize the single opening. Jingshe of Kunlun has shown that magic is not just a contest of power, it's a battle of wit and strategy. Karkaroff's favoritism and blatant double standards had already stirred public anger, and his behavior reached a new low when the judges began scoring Jingshui, who had no headmaster to defend her. Dumbledore gave her 8 points, Madame Maxime 7, and Ilvermorny's head gave 8. But when it was Karkaroff's turn, he barely glanced, and with an insolent smirk, flashed a 2. He didn't bother inventing a reason. He sneered in a way that said plainly, "This is aimed at all of you." He had dropped all pretense, behaving like a rabid dog that bit anyone in reach, trying to crush potential rivals to clear the path for Durmstrang's champion. The arena booed in unison. Even some Durmstrang students looked embarrassed. Several school heads who had been deliberately lowballed went pale, but bound by decorum and the occasion, they could only fix Karkaroff with icy stares rather than burst out. A cold, suppressed anger hung over the judge's table. Well, let's thank the champion from Kunlun," Ludo Bagman said, voice a little dry from tension. "And now, let's welcome our next champion, Cedric Diggory from Hogwarts." Amid thunderous cheers from the Hogwarts stands, Cedric walked out with steady, purposeful steps. His face was serious, his gaze firm. He went straight to the stone tablet, placed his hand on it, and the arena shifted. A gentle, grassy hill appeared under a simulated sky. The air smelled of earth and cut grass. Even the calls of birds had been recreated. In a hollow dug into the slope lay Cedric's opponent, a Swedish short-snout dragon. Sleek and elegant, its silver-blue scales shimmered under the fake sunlight. Its head was smooth, the snout short and upturned, hence its name. Less overtly ferocious-looking than some of the previous beasts, it was still enormous and deadly. The short snout was famed for flames so hot they could incinerate bone and wood instantly. Beautiful, almost smokeless, and devastating. "A Swedish short-snout dragon," Bagman announced. "A beautiful, but not to be underestimated dragon. Its flame is exceptionally hot and produces almost no smoke, but it's incredibly destructive. Champion Diggory must be wary of its quick flame jets." The dragon watched Cedric warily, growling a warning as it nudged the golden egg closer under its belly. Cedric, clearly well prepared and with a plan, did not try to outmaneuver it with tricks. He raised his wand and began, direct and rapid. "Reducto," he yelled. "Stupefy, Lapifors." Spells flashed straight for the dragon's head and wings. They struck home, drawing its ire. With an irate shriek, the short snout pushed itself up from the nest, exposing its full-size blue flame building deep in its throat. Cedric moved with quick efficiency. He transfigured a large rock into a stone wall just in time to shield himself from the first jet of flame. The barrier glowed red and began to melt under the heat, but Cedric was already on the move, firing further spells at the dragon's head. Angered, the short snout prepared another breath attack. Cedric seized the moment, conjuring a solid ball of water with aguamenti, and hurled it straight into the dragon's open maw. The beast choked and spluttered, momentarily thwarted. Cedric continued the harassment, stunning jabs, precise provocation, and the dragon, maddened, charged away from its nest toward the edge of the arena, baited exactly as he intended. Then Cedric made the move that left the stands gasping. With a dry crack, bang! His figure vanished from his original spot. The next instant, he reappeared in the very center of the dragon's nest. "Merlin!" Bagman's voice cracked with astonishment. "Cedric Diggory! He apparated straight into the dragon's nest. Good heavens, that was decisive." The arena exploded. Apparition is advanced magic. It requires a license, precise spatial calculations, and iron nerves. Attempting it in the middle of a perilous task, inches from a dragon, was an enormous risk. Cedric did it calmly and flawlessly, more polished even than his earlier attempts 2 years before. Standing in the nest, Cedric bent, picked up the golden egg, and straightened with a cool, satisfied smile. The entire maneuver had been clean and efficient. There had been no unnecessary grappling or hairbreadth escapes. The battle was effectively over the moment the dragon left its egg unguarded. The short snout roared in frustration, but the protective enchantments were already triggered. The hill scene faded, and Cedric Diggory stood alone in the arena center, golden egg in hand, wand tucked away as if he'd merely completed a small chore. He turned toward the Hogwarts stands, especially the Hufflepuffs, and gave a modest, confident smile. Cedric Diggory has used the most direct and effective method, a perfect apparition, to secure the golden egg. Bagman babbled, breathless. I have to say, that takes guts. I, for one, would never dare apparat face-to-face with a dragon. The Hogwarts cheers rose to a deafening roar. The Hufflepuffs were ecstatic.